Chapter 61. Calamity Fish Hunting, 6, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Let's see. Hansu looked at the relic in his hands and then walked into the woods as he sliced a nearby chihical tree with the blade of the forgotten sword. And then sticky sap started pour out from it. Hansu got the small remaining amount of Amar's incense, mixed it with the sap and then spread it on the forgotten sword until all of the surface was covered. It's done. Hansu walked up to the lake and resumed his previous hunt after covering his whole sword. Hagagagakak. The heads of the fishes got crushed apart from the countless blade slashes as they died off. Hansu nodded as he saw the fishes charging at him. At this level I can probably go and hunt the grown ones. It was an obvious fact that the adult ones had more of the extract within them than the baby ones. If he hunted the adult ones, then he could probably complete the extract in a shorter time. The reason why he had not done so was because he had no way of getting through their thick skulls and scales, but it was now more efficient to hunt the adult ones since he had obtained the forgotten sword. The location of the adults is in the deeper part of the lake. He needed some preparations to go there. Hansu pulled out all of the extracts from the heart and then started to run along the lakeshore. After a long while he could see a plant with its roots submerged in water. A plant which lived by sucking onto the toxic water. Hansu rushed onto the lotus-like plant. Tututuk. He pulled out the gwesh along with its roots, opened it and then retrieved a handful of seeds. Hansu then proceeded to collect the seeds of a few more gwesh plants and then threw one into the water as a test. Pushushashuk. Surprisingly, the small seed didn't sink when it entered the water and instead started to madly swell up. It swelled up by absorbing the water. Soluble toxin which made the toxic waters toxic. Hansu got on top of the seed which had swelled up to the size of a human head. It started to sink slowly once Hansu got on top of it, but as he got off the seed it came back up with its buoyancy. Good. Hansu then proceeded to create a bridge along the surface of the water towards the center of the lake where the adult fishes would be living. At that moment a light shone in the distance behind Hansu. Hung. At the same time very hot air rushed towards him. Though the actual heat was weak, if you take into account the distance from him and the origin of the flame, then that location would probably be similar to hell. I should hurry a bit more. It's still quite more amazing than I had thought. Hansu quickly started to run towards the inner parts of the lake after checking his rear. Tens of Gerdas were laid out on the floor after becoming roasted by the dark red flame. And Cheng and the other Quadratus members gulped as they saw this sight. Though thousands of Gerdas were running towards them, the man who had created the scene in front of them was much scarier. Kals Morin, who had dark red flames swirling around his hand, looked at the Gerdas he had roasted and then turned around as he spoke. Let's hear it. Pardon. Let's hear about how you are going to deal with this. I've gotten curious as to how and why you guys do your job like this. We will take care of it. Then a few people ran down as they launched off the cruise ship. Booing. The 2,000-man cruise ship started to get further and further away from the land. The Gerdas who had run up roared in anger, but they could only roam round the edge of the waters since they had no way of getting close to the cruise ship. Kals Morin stood still for a moment and then opened his mouth again. Are you worrying about my safety right now? I'm asking as to how you are going to perform the sightseeing. If this goes on, then all the newcomers will leak out. Can you guys block it all up? Jaisu stumbled as he carried his injured body and walked out. I'll solve it. If I run around the Kukulja lake and lead those things, then the newcomers will see that and... Kududuk. Ache. Jaisu screamed as Kals Morin's hand suddenly dug into his thigh. Kals Morin ignored his screams as he dug his thigh out and then pulled out a soggy reddish mixture. Kayak. As the mixture came out from his body, the Gerdas started to get even more agitated. Kals Morin threw that towards the Quadratus and then spoke. This guy is the guide, he can't die. Take this and spread it along the roads. Understood. The Quadratus felt cold sweats run down their backs as they looked at the shore where the Gerdas were going crazy. They had to carry this around and then spread it along the roads. Though they can bring back the Gerdas onto the roads if they spread this, but carrying this around meant that they had to keep all of those Gerdas on their tails. They couldn't even imagine the number of people who would die during this process. Damn it. It got screwed up real dirty. Cheng looked at Jaisu with a resentful expression. But he could only go. If not, then he would probably die in the hands of Cal's Morin instead of the Gerdas. It seemed like that Cal's Morin, who was full of anticipation, started to feel worse and worse as the plans got screwed up. If we can settle the matter for now with this, then it'll be good. But Cal's Morin destroyed Cheng's anticipation. And what are you going to do about that Hansu fellow? Take responsibility and bring him over. I really want to see his face now. Understood. Cheng clenched his teeth and then shouted. Plug up the roads first. Then find that guy with the lake as the main location. A guy who had set them up like this wouldn't have hidden. He said he was going to kill the calamity fish, right? Since that guy was doing something in the Kukulja lake, then he wouldn't be able to leave far until that was accomplished. Cal's Morin then looked at Jaisu with a cold expression. You will talk to me for a bit. About what you failed. You. Jaisu made an expression filled with fear from those terrifying eyes. Kududaduk. Hansu stabbed the Kukulja's skull and then quickly stabbed into the heart, pulled the heart out and then threw it into the selfish wealthy man's food jar. The efficiency fell in comparison to squeezing it out on land, but he didn't have the confidence to drag them onto land. Shkung. I've still almost collected it all. The by his waist had almost been filled up due to him hunting for almost 2 days straight. But there was still a problem. My stamina is too spent. The place where he could get the nutritional liquid was a bit far away from the Kukulja's lake. His stomach was completely empty after fighting for 2 days straight without any nutriments. Slashing the sword once was getting hard. Kadudaduk. The Kukulja noticed Hansu getting weaker as they rushed towards him even more crazily. At that moment something cut through the toxic waters and flew towards him while making pagagak sounds. An arrow filled with the power of a skill. It's a skill of the targeting type. Hansu compressed the free.form blade and then swung it. Boom. He had deflected the arrow, but the injuries that had barely healed ripped open, due to him straining the muscles of his whole body, and spread around as the Kukuljas who smelled this started to thrash around more aggressively. A person who looked like a commander of the Quadratus was looking towards him by the lakeshore and was preparing a skill. It seems they have stopped the fire for now. Actually, the 2 days he had gained were quite a lot. Though it would have been nicer to have a bit more, it happened already. He had to solve this situation. I don't have the strength to have a prolonged battle. He was hungry, was lacking in stamina due to the long fight he had and was losing blood as well. And Kukuljas were rushing towards him crazily from below. But he still had to complete the extract. I'll get rid of the guys who follow me. Hansu stepped onto the heads of the crazily rushing Kukuljas as he started to run towards the other side of the lake very quickly. And Ching grinded his teeth as he saw this. Shoot out restraining skills so he won't run away and chase him. The other commanders made a bitter expression at this. You want to go in there? The bridge trick that Hansu had done wasn't hard for them. And hunting down a tired person was an easy task for them. But even with all this it was still a bit burdensome for them to go into the lake which was swarming with Kukuljas. Ching shouted at those words. The conditions are still the same. And don't you know that it'll become more tiresome if you don't catch him while he's that tired? And say we don't catch him here. What are you going to report then? If he runs away to the other side of the lake, then it really becomes hard to catch him. Since the Kukulja lake was as big as the vast end route. If he hid in the jungle, then things become really tiresome. Everyone gulped at those words. If they miss the chance to catch him while he's tired, then they have to meet Cal's Morin. They could still clearly remember the scene where Cal's Morin dipped Jaisu into the sea and pulled him back out like shabu shabu as he asked him about his responsibilities. Jaisu had only stopped at a half-body bath in the toxic waters because he had the experience of the insides of the calamity fish. If they fail, then they might take on a full-body bath instead of a half-body bath. Fucker. We aren't even below that guy. But such a lame excuse did not work in this world where the differences in power were clear. Since they had signed the contract to bring that guy back, it was likely that they will suffer if they were to even discuss about it. The commanders, who were grinding their teeth, and the other Quadratus floated on pieces of wood or guesh seeds as they quickly pursued Hansu. You bitch. I've almost caught you. I'll vent all my anger on you. Unlike them, who were running with not many obstructions, their target with a bloody body was being attacked by the Kukuljas. At that moment, Hansu suddenly stepped onto the Kukulja as he jumped up into the air. Ha! A formless energy flowed into the sword on his hand as it instantly turned into a whip. Block it. At those words, the people who had been running activated their skills to guard their fatal spots and focused on regaining their balance. Pick. Pippipick. Cheng made a confused expression at the whip that had swept around them. The glamorous attack just swept around their limbs as if it wasn't targeting their fatal spots from the beginning. It was extremely sharp, so their flesh was cut, but it wasn't in fatal locations. Cheng smirked as he saw this. Did he perhaps think that we will run away from fear when we got injured? Bleeding actually did make things a bit more burdensome, since Kukuljas will charge onto them if they bled. But Hansu was bleeding much more than them anyway, and this amount of injury would heal up before a minute was up. But the moment Cheng and the other Quadratus tried to rush in enthusiastically, something unexpected occurred. Chwook! The injuries got wider and wider as a large amount of blood started to flow out. Ugh! What is this? Heal. Use the healing rune. Damn it. It won't close up. Blood was pouring out from the injury made by the whip. And the Kukuljas, who had smelled the blood that had been spilt on the waters, rushed at them madly. Pududaduk. Walk. Damn it. What is this nonsense? Cheng screamed inwardly in puzzlement as he struck at the Kukuljas charging at him. He was sure that such an option wasn't on Jaisu's sword. Hansu made a cold expression at the top of the lake, which had become chaos itself. Now our situations are a bit more equal. The second power that had unlocked after it evolved into a red artifact. Once you were hit by the attack filled with the strange power of Nirmaha, then the injury will not heal while the power lingered on the injury and instead cause a large amount of blood to pour out. A top-rated skill which was fatal towards the guys who trust in their healing skills and fight recklessly. He had been saving it because the mana usage was very large, but this was the perfect time for it. But this isn't quite enough. He was still bleeding as well, and the Kukuljas were charging at him and them without distinguishing between them. It had just become even. And the fight was better the more unfair it was. Hansu ripped off the sap that was covering the blade with his hands. Then the scent of the forgotten sword, which had been hidden beneath the strong Amar scent, started to permeate all around. The Kukuljas who had smelled this flinched in surprise as they crazily tried to distance themselves away from Hansu. They could only be scared, since this scent was that of the fearful predator that ate them as snacks. Pududaduk. As the scent, which could be smelled from hundreds of meters away under water, spread, the Kukuljas made a huge riot in order to get away from Hansu. And Hansu used this timing to throw the seeds to create the bridge as he got out to the lakeshore. Then he looked at the relic on his hand. This was an object that had been kept within the calamity fish for a very long time. Its scent could only be strong. He couldn't hunt properly if the Kukuljas ran away, so he had hidden this scent, but this was the most effective way in order to escape like this. Quiet. They won't be able to come out. That place was dangerous even for him. since the fear of the predator that had appeared for a moment had increased their vicious instincts a step further. Hansu, who had been looking at the Kukuljas who were gathering onto the center of the lake in a crazy manner, hid the scent of the forgotten sword again as he completed the Kukulja extract. Hansu sighed as he looked at the mess his body had turned into. He had predicted that it wouldn't be easy, but it was extremely tiring. There was a huge difference between the beasts of the red zone and the people of the tutorial. Chaldean. I might kick your ass if I see you again. Hansu, who had been thinking of Chaldean who had set up a strict schedule for him, thought of the next objective. Nutritional fluid. The reason why the wide World Tree mountain range became an area of dispute. And one of the other reasons why he had to heal this World Tree. If I collect that, then it'll be the end. Hansu looked at the Kukulja heart extract which he had filled half of the pouch with and then started to gather the guesh seeds. And soon Hansu gathered a few thousand guesh seeds and quickly rushed towards the location where the nutritional fluid flowed. The proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. The second power of Hansu's ring is revealed. Chapter 62. Calamity Fish Hunting, 7, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Cow's Morin clicked his tongue. The blue carrier pigeons have not been flying back for a while. This meant that everyone who had gone off had failed. I can't leave this to them anymore. He thought that he would be able to find that guy using Jisu's trait pretty quickly, but it seems that there was a lot of restrictions that made it so that he could not find the person he found earlier for a whole month. Well, he probably never thought of losing to a newcomer in the first place anyway. Alan asked with a slightly confused expression while looking at Cow's Morin warming up his body. You said you weren't going to move because you came for vacation, right? Cow's Morin smiled. I came here to enjoy. I feel like that guy will make this fun for me. It's been a while since I found somebody who offended me like this. There's no satisfaction in smashing down timid people. Ringing those who offended you was truly fun and satisfying. I'm going. You watch for those who run away towards the plains above the Kukulja lake. Cow's Morin left those final words as he quickly disappeared from the top of the boat. Hansu thought about his next objective as he erased his tracks. Since he had collected the Kukulja heart extract, it was now time for him to go to the next stage. I need to supplement it with nutritional fluid. One of the two core ingredients of the hardening liquid. Hansu took out the juicer he received from the helper clansman and then ran towards the end route between the sea and the Kukulja lake. In this place, if you ignore the few special cases within the World Tree area, it was impossible to satisfy one's hunger and thirst without the juicer. Hansu could finally see a greenish part on the center of some blazing ruins that resembled a vein after a long run on top of the tree root. Found it. The exterior. The root of World Tree was largely divided into the exterior and the interior. The interior absorbed the toxic waters from the roots and then sent it to the trunk, which acted as the main part of the tree. And the exterior supplied nutrition to all of the World Tree by purifying the toxic waters into the nutritional fluid. The exterior, which was made of tens of thousands of strands, spread out from the deepest parts of the World Tree roots and even to the outside. And the only place where the survivors of this place, which was always burning, could find liquid and food was that World Tree exterior's nutritional fluid. A large amount of people were using all their strengths and using the juicer like the helper clansman had told them. But of course there was a problem. Barely any comes out. Damn it. What is this? It barely comes out. What will this amount do to anyone? This machine, which had a few skills applied onto it, pulled out the nutritional fluid once one takes it and puts it onto the exterior. But if not much of the nutritional fluid flowed through the exterior, then what would the juicer do even if it had extremely good specs? As if the exterior was symbolizing the dried up World Tree, a very small amount of nutritional fluids were running through it. I need to find a thicker exterior. He had to scratch off quite a large amount of nutritional fluids for the hardening liquid. It wasn't hard to find a thicker exterior. Since if you follow the exterior up, you will find a thicker exterior where the other exteriors met up. But there were people on the thicker exterior already. We meet again. Hansu shrugged as he looked at the 150 people gathered. Johann and the others were driving out the other people approaching the exterior as they were filling up their nutritional fluid containers. Get lost. Don't come close. We will use this place first. The people who were driven out cried out in rage. You damned bastards. If you suck it all up, then what do you want us to do? Johann smirked as he laughed. If you feel wrong, then go up higher than us and suck it up there. Fuckers. The people cursed quietly. Who didn't know about that? But the higher they go, the stronger the beasts and people get. Of course, it was more dangerous to go higher. So people realized it at once. That they had to get stronger no matter what and then keep climbing up. If they keep sucking out the nutritional fluid in the exterior above, then the people below will barely be able to taste the nutritional fluid. Which means that they had to persevere to get the nutritional fluid no matter what, get stronger and then drink from the exterior above where there is more nutritional fluid. Hansu shook his head as he saw this scene. How could there be unity if things go like this? It was basically the same as fighting for water during a drought. Actually, the fight to take over the nutritional fluid was even more intense above. And this is why I must revive the world tree even more. It was impossible to unite people when the amount of food was limited. It was already not enough, but if the people who will be sent in next year are taken into account, then it will really be insufficient. They will all starve like the communism of the old days and then all die of starvation. Unity was a job that was after revival of the world tree. Well, it's not to the point where they will starve to death yet. Which means that it wasn't time for him to care yet. Hansu landed in front of Johann, who was driving off the other people. And as soon as Johann saw Hansu, his expression scrunched up. Then he shouted loudly. Kong Hansu. Where did you hide the boat? Johann loudly shouted. We can't go up higher. There are beasts swarming up above. There was a reason why Johann and his crew were staying a bit below the lake. They had seen the calamity fish on the way. And because of this they tried to climb up as fast as possible as soon as the instructions of the helper clansmen ended. But they gave up as soon as they saw the beasts blocking their way. Since thousands of beasts were swarming around. The lake was even worse. And they were raising their strengths by collecting the nutritional fluid like this and hunting weak beasts because they could not die like this. But if they had a boat, then everything would be solved. Give us the boat. You don't need it. We will leave on the boat. They had rushed back to find the boat after seeing that the road was blocked, but they could not find it as if this guy had hidden it. Hansu shook his head at Johann's words. He had to ride on that to hunt the calamity fish. Persevere well here. Don't think about going up. What? I'm going to kill that calamity fish, so I need to use the boat there. He's really insane. He had heard something like this when this guy was fighting that Camille woman. You want us to believe such nonsense? Just say you don't want to give us the boat instead. Johann grinded his teeth. Hansu chucked as he looked at that Johann. Since he could guess what he was thinking. Don't do that. If he had let these guys off in a different place, then it would have taken a lot longer. He could understand Johann's intentions, so he just shrugged and didn't really say much more. Since he had long gotten used to people telling him to put down the luggage after he had saved them too. While Johann was grinding his teeth, Hansu leisurely went up to the exterior and then plugged the pointy part of the juicer. Chook. And then the juicer activated as it pulled out the nutritional fluid a drop at a time. Hansu then drank the nutritional fluid that came out from the juicer. Much better. Though the world tree had dried up, it was still the world tree. He had just drank just a few drops of the water of life that was provided through the exterior, but it already started to fill up Hansu's whole body with nutrients. The slowed down healing speed from the lack of nutrition quickly came back to normal as the nutritional fluid swirled around his body. Since I quenched my thirst, it's time to move. Hansu got up his seat. The amount he needed to gather was not possible to be gathered here anyway. There were two reasons why he had come to the exterior on the bottom. To replenish his spent stamina and to use it as the starting point to go to a bigger one. Even more so since this thing went up and down through the underground. Don't piss people off randomly and just stay here for a bit. The time was getting saved due to him having earned quite a nice weapon. He would be able to set off towards the calamity fish in just a little while. Hansu ended with those words as he followed the exterior into a corner of the jungle. Johann looked at that Hansu with a cold expression. I need to find the hidden boat. The reason why that guy could be so laid back was because he had the boat. Since he could leave at any time. Johann had to find the boat. But how? That guy was so cautious to the point where he was constantly erasing his tracks as he moved. And the dangerous jungle. It would be hard to chase. But Johann suddenly had a strange thought. Was something over there? If you follow the way he had come from, the lake was there. A guy of that level would have already been to such a place and came back, but for him to only come out now. Is something over there? There was a possibility. Since that guy had a strange psychic power. Then the reason why he had driven the boat to this dangerous place could be explained. Killing the calamity fish. That's definitely a lie. Is he trying to gain something here and then escape with the boat? And the fact that he had told them to stay here was even more suspicious. Johann cautiously gathered up a few people and shared his thoughts. A few of them actually made a doubtful expression, but then they agreed with Johann's thoughts of having a look as they created a search team to follow the path Hansu had come from. And soon they arrived at the lake, which was quite familiar to them. The lake of the monsters which had thrown them into despair. But there was a person who had gotten there before them. Who is that? There was a man who was meticulously searching around the lake in Johann's sight. The foreign-looking man searched around the route, but once he saw them he ignored them as if he lost his joy and started to focus onto the work he was doing. Damn it. They're all the same. Johann, whose pride had actually taken quite a toll due to Hansu, had actually gotten pissed at the attitude of the man ignoring them but couldn't really say anything back because that man looked dangerous at just a simple glance. Even without the helper clansman's warning he could still feel the strange bloodthirsty aura radiating from that man. Johann decided to ignore that man just like how he had done to them and spoke to the surrounding people. Since it looks dangerous, let's back off for now and then look for Hansu's tracks when that man leaves. Johann did not realize that this was a fatal mistake. The ears of the man, who had been ignoring Johann and his crew, trembled as he yelled out roughly. Hey, you over there. You know Hansu. Shit. Everyone was shocked at the sudden shout of the man. They didn't know who he was, but they didn't want to get mixed up with such a dangerous person. Johann tensed up but then thought that he didn't have anything to lose as he broadened his chest and tried to speak. We do, but then what are yo? Puke. Kohuhuk. The broadened chest had to be folded back immediately. Johann looked at the man who had appeared in front of him in an instant and had smashed him on his stomach with a pained expression. What? Did I even do wrong? Kals Morin looked at that Johann as he spoke. You bastard. Dare to look at my eyes when you're just a mere newcomer. You want to die. Kuhuk. Damn it. With just that as the reason. It felt like his whole intestines were tangling up from just one kick. At the same time Johann realized why the helper clansman told them to not piss off the people who had come in the previous year. Since the explosive movements that were combined with skills were hard even for their eyes to follow. Good. It was hard enough to look for his tracks anyways. You guys will help me a bit. He was about to explode from annoyance because that guy had hidden his tracks so well, but for these guys to get caught. Kohu. He probably knew that someone was going to chase him, but it seems like he didn't expect something like this. Kals Morin looked at the chicks with a cold expression. You got off here? Yes. Good. Kals Morin estimated which way that guy would have gone. He didn't know why Hansu was running around the jungle, but he probably knew that there were going to be pursuers. There's no way that he'd hide his tracks otherwise. Then there was only one choice that guy would make. Running away from him when Jaisu hadn't even told him about himself was an impossible thing. It was impossible to run towards the wide open plain above the Kukulja lake because he had told Alan to guard that area. The only escape route then was the sea. If he went near the boat and then waited, then he would be able to catch him for sure. If not, then I can just break apart the boat first. Since I can kill him slowly once he can't run away anymore. Though Hansu had hidden it, it wasn't hard to find the traces of the boat with a skill once they reached the place where they had gotten off. Johann, who had been looking at Kals Morin with a fearful expression, spoke. Anyways. Will you really give us the boat? Once you find it. Kals Morin looked at Johann with an amused expression. These guys. Do they not have a very good relationship? From what he heard, they would have all died if not for this Hansu guy, but they were cooperating extremely well. He was going to twist the necks of a few people if they didn't comply, but he felt awkward to do so when they cooperated so well. Well. It's better for me. Kals smiled contentedly as he spoke. Of course. You guys take the boat. He was going to destroy it anyway for the tour, but this was the time to give hope. They would cooperate better if there was a chance for survival. As if those words gave Johann strength, he steadily headed towards the location where they had gotten off the boat. And then he spoke towards Kals. It's here. Let's see. Kals Morin's skill activated. Since the ferry's boats weren't hard to find due to their particularities. TSK. It'd be nice to find Hansu with this. But there were too many different scents mixed in the last battlefield for that. But soon the confident face of Kals Morin scrunched up. This guy and that guy. Why are they all retarded? The location where the Aronan's chaser pointed to. He could feel the traces of the boat a few hundreds meters deep under the sea. But how would Hansu pull that up? The 500-man boat's weight was not something a human can pull up. Even if the amount of their muscles increased, there was still a limit with a human's body mass. Where would he find a rope to pull that up while withstanding the toxic waters? These retards. He didn't hide it, it just sunk. This meant that Hansu guy had gained a boat somewhere else already. A boat that the Quadratus guys had not smashed yet. Quadratus and these guys. They're really extremely frustrating. The important fact was that he had wasted time because these guys. Catching him would become much harder due to this slight change. Since when it came to pursuing someone, the difference between a few hours and half a day was the difference between heaven and earth. These bitches. Houak. The thing that he needed the most currently was somebody to vent his anger on. The dark red flames started to float around Kals Morin as if they were reacting to his rage. Good. Hansu, who had sliced apart the beasts in the exterior located deep within the jungle and was pulling out the nutritional fluid with the juicer, nodded at the smooth process. There was no need to share it because it was an exterior located in a dangerous place, and he was also gaining runes steadily even while chopping apart the beasts. It seems like the work will finish faster than my expectation. Anyways, I thought that Kals Morin guy would chase me, but I seem to be wrong. Did he lose his way somewhere? But Hansu just shrugged his shoulders. I wonder why my luck is so good. It's good anyway. Once the materials Camille Rowe finds get mixed in, then it'll be completed. Hansu, who had been sucking the nutritional fluid out from the exterior, quickly moved towards the next exterior. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. Johann finally gets what he deserves, slightly smiling face. Chapter 63. Galadriel's Relic, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Quarururu. Cowles Morin was standing within the blazing jungle. Who? This rat of a bastard. Boom. 5 days. He had searched around this area, looking for Hansu, for 5 days. He wouldn't have been this mad if there weren't any traces in the first place. But the most annoying thing was that there were very faint traces of him left behind. Sometimes a faint scent could be smelled, and sometimes the traces of the forgotten sword he had stolen from Jaisu were left behind. This made him even madder. Since he was just tailing his back even if he was chasing with all his might. God damn it. It would have been easier if he had brought some of his subordinates here, but he had come here for a vacation. But then he'd rather commit suicide than receive Aelin's help. Since he'd lose face. Then Jaisu spoke cautiously towards Cowles Morin. How about catching Camille Rowe? Camille Rowe. Cowles Morin slightly frowned as he heard this. This was something that Jaisu had been suggesting for a while. Since Hansu's main goal was the calamity fish, he would naturally be dragged in if you catch his comrade. But there was a reason why Cowles Morin had not done this yet. Damn it. Not being able to catch a single newcomer is enough face lost but for me to take people hostage. If Emil Staden, from one of the 6 pillars, heard this, then he will laugh at him while holding on to his stomach. No, he would become a public object of ridicule to the clans of the 12 roots. But his rage was currently exceeding his pride. There were instances in his plan where he would not be able to catch a guy for 5 days. Well, if I take care of things well, there won't be rumors. Cowles Morin asked Jaisu. How do you want to do it? You told me you couldn't use your trait yet. Jaisu laughed. Hansu might erase his tracks, but why would she? She would not think that someone will be chasing her. Who? Since we almost finished the sightseeing preparation, we'll separate to find her and then send a blue carrier pigeon once we do. Cowles Morin made a satisfied expression as he nodded. You be careful. You are the main actor of the second part of the tour. Remember why I take care of you so well. That I know very well. You guys find Camille according to your plans. I shall continue searching for Hansu. If he gave up like this, then his pride would be damaged. Camille was a last resort. I will catch him before that. Jaisu nodded as he saw Cowles Morin grind his teeth and send blue carrier pigeons in every direction. Who? Hansu looked at his food jar container. A container that was full of the nutritional fluid and the Kukulja heart extract. I've almost collected all of the materials for the hardening fluid too. Since he had some time left until Camille would finish gathering all the materials, he had gathered a few extra materials that he would use on the boat. As he saw flames exploding from place to place, it seemed like that Cowles Morin had been enraged to no extent. It is pretty annoying. But it seemed like that Cowles Morin wasn't that talented despite being the captain of the shock troopers. If Cowles had raised his chaser skill, then it would have been harder to hide his tracks. Let's have a peek. Hansu adjusted the shape of the formless energy of the forgotten sword so that light would be diffracted. It wasn't that hard. He just needed to change the thickness a little bit. He then proceeded to apply mud onto his face as he started to look over the cruise ship in the distance along with his transformed sword that acted like binoculars. He knew of the cruise ship's location due to the heat that had come off during the Gerda's incident. In order to not get caught within their eyes, he had to stay this far back to look over them discreetly. Hansu frowned after looking over the location of where the blue carrier pigeons were flying and Cowles Morin's movements. Look at these guys. They changed the target. He didn't think that Cowles would have done such a thing due to his pride of being the captain of the shock troopers of Lighthouse, but it seems that his rage had overcome his pride. Let's move. He had collected all the materials anyway. The time had come for him to reunite with Camille. Let's see. She would be around the Ira mines or Kukuru burrows by now. A dumb person wouldn't know, but Camille was rather smart, so she would choose the most efficient route. Which meant that she had to be in one of these two. I have to find Camille before them. Otherwise it'll become troublesome. First I'll go to Kokura Burrows. Hansu carefully got out of his seat and quickly headed off somewhere. Kaak. Camille madly slashed her short spear towards the Irams running towards her. Hung. The short spear endlessly slashed through the air. The respiratory holes of the Irams, who had the shape of a beetle, were sliced apart as they dropped down. Quadaduk. Camille split the stomach of the Iram, took out the secreting gland and then squeezed the liquid into a small bottle. I collected it all. Camille cracked the joints on her body. She had collected all of 14 ingredients out of the 17 ingredients Hansu had asked. My progress is faster than I expected, it seems like I'll finish in about a day. Camille started to head out of the mine after looking at the bottle of liquid. But at the same time she could feel somebody coming into the mine with her acute battle senses. Camille tensed up and focused. Iram mines were quite difficult for newcomers. Which meant that whoever came here was not a newcomer. But she sighed as she recognized the footsteps and breath and climbed up. You're here. Why are you here already though? I haven't collected it all. Hansu shrugged at Camille's words and spoke. The situation changed a little. Some annoying guys seem to have gotten on our tail. Annoying guys. Camille made a confused expression. If this guy, who didn't recognize how high the sky was, thought of somebody as annoying, then that person would be far beyond that. Who is it? Cals Morin. What did you just say? Cals Morin. He seems to be the captain of the shock troopers of Lighthouse. What the hell have you done while you've been away from me? Camille shouted with a flustered expression. She was a third year too, but Cals Morin was at a different level. If she fought him then she'd just melt down without being able to do anything. No, why is such a guy on the end route? But there was only one important fact. That those guys will chase them. Camille made an expression full of despair and then spoke towards Hansu. Let's start up the boat. There's no time. She hadn't gathered all the ingredients, but if they waited here and then encountered Cals Morin then they would both die. No matter how strong this guy was he could not go against Cals Morin. Did you gather all the materials? Camille shook her head at Hansu's words. Not the Kokura scales, mixed blood fairy breath and Arantal lights. Hansu started to pull some things out of his pockets after hearing Camille's words and spoke. It's Kokura scales. I've gotten it on the way here. Focus on getting the other two for me. What are you going to do? Hansu looked at Camille and spoke. I'm going to buy some time while you gather the materials. Not a single material could be left out. Since an unstable hardening liquid will be made. Let's meet at this location after you gather the materials. I will bring the boat there. Hansu then told her the place they would meet up at. Camille looked at Hansu with a worried expression and asked. Isn't it better to collect the materials quickly with me? Hansu shook his head at these words. He had seen it on the way here. The net had been closed up much more than he had anticipated. At this rate they would be caught by the time they gather the materials and get to the boat. One person had to buy some time. There's no need to lead the others astray. He just needed to get Cals Morin distracted. Since Camille could handle the rest. Hansu then thought of Cals Morin. He had left traces around wide open spaces on purpose while running away. Very faintly. Only so that one could find them if they had a chaser skill. He had left olfactory traces sometimes and other times he left temperature-related traces or footsteps. And he saw Cals Morin chasing him from afar with the transformed sword and then checked his reaction. The result was clear. The chaser skill he had learned is a type of scent chaser. That guy was chasing his direction with the changes of scent. Hansu thought up to this point as he ripped a piece of his clothing off, ripped it to shreds and smeared blood onto it. He then held onto it tight with his hands as he spoke to Camille. I'll leave it to you. Hansu ended with those words as he quickly started to run towards the jungle, and Camille looked at Hansu with a complicated expression but then also ran off to gather the materials. Cal's Morin frowned at Hansu's scent, which had suddenly gotten stronger. He had hidden so well up to this point. Why is this? Cal's Morin deducted the reason after a brief thought. The answer had come out. He has been watching me. The reason why Hansu had shown himself was clear. Since it was after they started chasing after Camille Rowe. If I knew that he would come out like this, then I would have done this sooner. Cal's Morin didn't actually have a lot of expectations against that Camille girl. Since he hadn't thought that Hansu was a person who would jump out because of one hostage. He had told Jaisu to do this because he was so fed up, but for such a thing to happen. I'll gladly kill you. Cal's Morin laughed maniacally as he chased the traces. The traces were very clear, unlike the ones so far. He had thought that these were traces to lure him in, but such a thing could be clearly seen. All his senses and the skill were telling him clearly that Hansu had just gotten past this area. Cal's Morin made a cold expression after chasing these traces for a long time. If he set up a trap, then Hansu might not even be at the end of this chase, since he was much more formidable than he had expected. If that happened, then he was really going to find that Camille and rip her to shreds. Hansu might be different, but she can't run away from him. It would be quite a nice target to vent his anger on, since it seemed like Hansu valued her greatly to come out like this. I should tell the guys to find Camille first. Cal's Morin flinched momentarily while he was just about to send a blue carrier pigeon to tell them to keep chasing Camille's traces. And then he changed the message of the pigeon as he saw somebody standing in the distance. Cal's Morin walked towards Hansu, who was standing with a leisurely expression by the Kukulja lake after sending the blue carrier pigeons. I really wanted to meet you, friend. I would have been really disappointed if I wasn't able to meet you this time along. Hansu chuckled towards that Cal's Morin. I could only help you since you could not find me after all that. I even left hints. Though the hints had not been left behind to help him, but saying this was enough to stimulate him. And as expected, veins appeared on Cal's Morin's forehead as soon as he heard Hansu's words. Because everything from having to run after a one single newbie to worrying to get disturbed for the sightseeing and faking a hostage-wielding replayed in his memory. This fucking son of a bitch. But soon after, Cal's Marine took a deep breath in and out. This guy was a fish that was already caught. Even if you have a boat that you left somewhere, I won't allow you to get over there. As long as one comes into his sight, they can't escape by running. He just needed to catch him and slowly smash him apart. You brat. Let's see if you can still say that while you're getting burnt. As Cal's Morin approached him with flames surrounding his body, Hansu threw the guesh seeds in his pocket onto the lake as he ran away on the lake. And then he sliced his thigh. Then blood started to pour out as it spread out in the Kukulja lake. Pududadadak. The Kukuljas were madly rushing towards him since he had covered the sword again. Cal's Morin flinched at this and then mocked him. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to hold on over there? Others might be different, but he wasn't scared away from going towards the lake from the fear of getting bit by Kukuljas. He just needed to burn them all. Cal's Morin stopped atop the Kukuljas' bodies as he madly started to run atop on the lake. Every time Cal's Morin stepped on the Kukuljas' head, their skulls were crushed like tofu. Hansu looked at Cal's Morin and then laughed. Of course he couldn't lead him astray and then get to the boat on top of the water. That guy was clearly much stronger than him. Since he was on a different level from Jaisu or the other Quadratus guys. But there was no need to go atop of the water. The breeding lake was something that the Kukuljas, who originally lived on the sea, had dug out. The underground passage here is connected to the sea. Hansu finished his thoughts and then looked at the artifact on Cal's Morin's neck rapaciously. If he has something like that, then he would definitely follow me, right? Keep my item safe. Hansu smiled at Cal's Morin, who had the survival-type artifact that was extremely hard to acquire, as he jumped down towards the lake where the Kukuljas were swarming in. This crazy bastard. Cal's Morin grinded his teeth as he saw this. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 1/3. It seems maximum effort is put into breaking Ecchi. The sponsors even make jokes with the amount of money listed. Chapter 64. Galadriel's Relic, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Kururk. Hansu ripped off the covering on his forgotten sword as soon as he sunk into the water. Quack. Then all the Kukuljas, who had been chasing him from the scent of the blood, were frightened as they ran away in all directions. And in the place they had run to, there was another target. But Hansu didn't care for such a thing as he started to swim away madly. If that guy was someone who he could kill with the Kukuljas, then he would have done so above the lake. Boom! And as he expected, an intense heat wave exploded out from above the lake. Tens of Kukuljas were roasted in an instant. The power of that attack could be estimated to a degree from the fact that the ones underwater had become like that. Hansu, who had covered himself with the demonic dragon's reinforcement, extended out the magic force of the reinforcement and then created it into the shape of the webbed feet of a duck. He then flapped his arms and legs and quickly started to head downwards. Deeper and deeper. So that the attacks above the water wouldn't reach him. Then soon the toxic water that Hanu was swimming through started to boil. He's following. He knew even without looking. Since the heat was slowly approaching towards Hansu. Hansu stabbed the wooden pipe he had prepared into the Chuuk. Then the air he had gathered previously started to come into Hansu through his mouth. He had to breathe. TSK. It'd be nice if I had a survival-type skill. Survival-type skills, or artifacts with survival-type skills applied onto, made it easier to adjust to extreme environments. They just were extremely hard to acquire. Hansu thought of the artifact on the neck of Cal's. An artifact that boosted the survivability of one when they are underwater or about to faint. If he has that thing, then he can breathe under the waters. Follow well. Hansu breathed air as he searched for the path. There should be traces around here. Finding the exit was easy. Since the location where the adult fishes, and not the baby ones, are swimming meant that it was closer to the sea. And Hansu had already looked over that location while creating the Kukulja heart extract. If you follow the traces of the adult Kukuljas, then the path leading to the sea would come out. Qua. At that moment an extreme amount of heat was directed towards Hansu. Kururu. Hansu frowned at the intent of the heat that was trying to boil him alive. Since he felt the magic force of the demonic dragon reinforcement being taken off in chunks. It would have been dangerous if I fought him above the water. The only reason why this was possible was because he was being chased under the water. Otherwise his skin would have been cooked red in an instant. Hansu didn't slow down his swimming speed as he swung the formless whip behind him. The waves that were transmitted through the liquid told Hansu numerous things. He could guess the guy's location to a degree without looking back. No, the flapping of the Kukuljas surrounding him told the exact location of that guy. Pot. The formless whip with the power applied to it flew backwards. Boom. The magic force of the demonic dragon's reinforcement collided with his skill and created a huge force wave. Thankfully, the reinforced whip was able to penetrate Cal's magic force and skills and succeeded in creating a very minute injury. Thankfully it's a reinforcement of the Inferno type. Inferno type reinforcements' offensive powers were extremely high in comparison to other reinforcements, but their defenses were a bit lacking. And as if Cal's skills were the same as that, his defensive skill masteries were a bit low and were of lower quality. Passasak. The applied to his injury started to madly course through the injury and started to widen it. And as the injury got wider, blood started to pour out and the Kukuljas who smelled the blood under the water started to madly rush towards him. Kuduk. Cal's Morin clenched his teeth while swimming and then gathered a large amount of the power of reinforcement on his hands. Then he singed his injury. Cheek. Blood squirmed around as it tried to come out, but there was no way to, since he had forcefully signed the injury and closed it up. The power of the hemorrhage tried to constantly widen the injury, but Cal's Morin smashed the skulls of the Kukuljas swarming towards him as he pulled out the pieces of bone, used them as needles as he stabbed them in between his injuries and then singed it again. Hansu clicked his tongue as he looked at that sight. That's one tough guy. Doing such a thing meant that he had no intentions of going back up. The will that wanted to catch him no matter what. Cal's Morin, who had closed the injury to an extent, stepped on the Kukuljas rushing towards him as he tried to get closer to Hansu. Shall I give him a few more presents? Hansu pulled out a few guesh seeds from his pouch as he stabbed them through with his whip. Like a skewer. And before the seeds could puff up, he swung the whip and threw them towards Cal's Morin, who was trying to approach him. This time, he applied instead of. Since it was a bit hard to use them both at the same time. It was too inefficient and too mana-costly to use both power destruction and hemorrhage when his attack wasn't a direct attack. Kung. Cal's Morin clenched his teeth as he saw the whip flying towards him again. He had to block it no matter what. It'll become very troublesome if he were to keep getting injured by that vicious object. Kururu. Cal's Morin brought his defensive skill to the limit as he poured the flame of the magic force towards the whip. If the magic force of the attack was the same as before, then it will melt against his flame. But Cal's Morin was shocked that that actually happened. Shururik. The flame of the magic force disappeared as if it was erased. Hansu's whip had become weaker as if it was also affected by the skill, but it was still flying towards him. Soon the whip broke through his defensive skill like it was glass and then penetrated his body. Pushushuk. God damn it. What the hell is this? Did he have to get stabbed through like this constantly? But Cal's Morin, who had been hit by the whip with a nervous expression, suddenly made an evil smile. Ah, I see. It seems that he can't use both skills at the same time. The whip that was weakened from his skill and attack was weak enough for him to tough it out with his resistances. As long as that damned hemorrhage didn't come at him, then an attack of that level wouldn't be able to threaten him. But even before Cal's could finish his thoughts, something started to puff up between his armors like underneath his arms. Ugh. Cal's Morin was flustered momentarily at his body that started to rise up suddenly. Then he grinded his teeth as he found out the identity of the object that was making him rise up. Guesh seeds. This damned bastard. He prepared things like this as well. And for him to be able to store this underwater meant that he had already done some things to the seed. Which meant that Hansu had led him under the water after he had already planned the underwater as the stage they would have the fight. Kook. Cal's Morin glared at Hansu after ripping off the guesh balloons. The distance between them that he had closed had been returned to what it was before due to him having risen for a moment. And the Kukuljas were weirdly not approaching Hansu and were only madly charging against him. If I catch him. I can kill him if I catch him. This was clear no matter what tricks Hansu had up his sleeves. You bitch. I'm going to keep chasing you. He felt like he would really go crazy if he backed off here. But the thing that made him mad was a different emotion. Afraid. I'm afraid of this guy. A newcomer. It wasn't that Hansu himself was scary. Fuck. I don't know what else he has prepared. Hansu had led him towards the lake and had completed the preparation to fight him in it. Which meant that Hansu had already estimated that he would follow him, and as well as the fact that he would jump under the water. This meant that Cal's was running around in the palm of Hansu's hands. And Hansu was not afraid of Cal's at all. Which meant that Hansu was confident enough to either run away from him or even kill him if he were to follow him till the end. I cannot agree on this. Cal's Morin quickly went up to the surface of the water and then started to run atop of it. *TL. It's Jesus, move quickly on top of the water, get above him and then catch up by diving down. This was just a lake and there was a limit to its depth. Since he had found out his direction and movements, he would be able to chase him much faster if he were to chase from above. But Cowles Moran frowned after running for a bit. Fuck, a giant mountain that was blocking his path. A mountain was standing between the lake and the sea. I'm going in. If he were to climb over the mountain then he might lose him on the entrance of the underwater passage that could be anywhere. But Cowles Moran flinched the moment he tried to jump into the underwater passage. Since he felt that something was different. Then his expression crunched up as he felt the area around his neck. This son of a bitch. Cowles Moran screamed out in rage after getting his, which is almost as precious as the, stolen from him, but he could not go down to the dark underground of the lake. Since going through the underwater passage, which he didn't know the length of, while not being able to breathe was almost the same as committing suicide. Cowles Moran's expression, which was covered by rage and agitation, started to get colder and scarier. And soon Cowles Moran started to quickly run on top of the water as if he had determined on something. Hup. Hanso, who sticked his head out of the sea surface after getting out of the lake, took a deep breath and then looked around his surroundings. Let's see. Though he might be pissed off quite a bit. He won't be able to chase. He was quite a distance away from the boat. Hansu quickly ran along the shore and then jumped into the sea after arriving at the spot where he had sunk the boat. Plunk. It's nice. Hansu made a content expression as he put on the ahol breaths that he had stolen with the whip onto his neck. His reaction speed and movements will increase greatly from this. A human could die no matter how high their runes were if they didn't have the necessary elements, but this thing filled up that spot. There isn't much difficulty in breathing. Hansu threw away the pipe and then continued downwards. Bubble bubble. After a while the large boat that he had sunk could be seen. An enormous boat that was not possible to raise with the abilities of a human. But there was a way. Pong pong. Hansu filled up all the passages that led towards the deck with the Arun wood planks. And then he poured all the gwesh seeds within his pockets out. Rumble. The gwesh seeds that were released inside the boat started to suck up the boats at an extreme speed. Pwayawak. The volumes of the seed started to increase very rapidly. Hansu retrieved the Arun wood planks and kelp mucus sacks and then quickly came outside the boat. Bubble bubble bubble. The toxic waters that filled the boat started to pour out of the holes after getting pushed back by the puffed up gwesh seeds. And soon the area below the deck was filled with tens of thousands of gwesh balloons. Kududududuk. The boat that had sunk deep within the sea started to make large noises as it started to rise up. Hansu quickly got onto the rising boat and grabbed onto the controls. Then the boat started to turn under Hansu's controls even while underwater. This was pretty simple since it was a boat with the fairy's magic applied to it. Since there might be people around, I'll raise it after I get a bit far away. The 500-man boat moved quite a distance while rising up to the surface, and by the time it had come above the surface it was quite a distance away from the shore. Hansu fixed below the boat with the Arun wood and kelp mucus sacks, shrugged his shoulders and pulled a few gwesh balloons to control the buoyancy of the boat and then started head towards the location where he told Camille that he would meet her. Time to go catch it. The preparations were complete. He will have to follow right. After getting robbed by a newcomer like this. Hansu laughed coldly as he thought of the cruise ship that was somewhere in the distance. Jaisu made a shocked expression after seeing the mess Cowles Moran had become when he came back. Did he turn like this while going against that newcomer? What is this? He was mocking me for it. Smirks tried to rise up from within, but Jaisu quickly maintained his expression. The moment he does this, then he will get burnt to death. Though Cowles Moran didn't seem like he was that agitated, Jaisu knew instinctively that the Cowles Moran whose pride has been damaged greatly was the most dangerous. Cowles Moran looked at Jaisu and the Quadratus as he spoke. Let's go to the calamity fish. Pardon. That's only after the calamity fish arrives here and eats the roots. Jaisu made a confused expression. There were 2 stages to the calamity fish tour. The first stage where they watched the calamity fish gobble up the root. The second stage where they proceed inside the calamity fish up to a safe distance and then look around its insides. Well, that's not really the goal of the tour, to be exact. The reason why Jaisu was still alive and why so many strong people were gathered was because of the second stage of the tour. But Cowles Morin spoke with a cold expression. No. We're going now. I'll take care of it. Let's go. I'll convince the other sightseers. Since they will be quite fed up by now. Jaisu and the Quadratus could not say anything due to Cowles Morin saying this with an expression that told them that he will rip them apart if they were to disagree. Camille stared at the distant sea from the promised location. He'll bring the ship to this location. Camille thought of the last words Hansu had said during their conversation. The insides of the calamity fish were quite complex due to many organs being tangled up with another. Her guidance was needed to proceed on the safe and easy routes. Hansu replied to those words. What is he thinking of? Camille thought of the second attempt that she had with Jaisu. When they almost died because they made a wrong turn after going in without knowing anything. That path was indeed very fast but also very dangerous. Did he find someone to help him somewhere? It'll still be very dangerous though. Camille looked into the distant sea with a bitter expression. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. Camille is waiting for Hansu to come pick her up. Chapter 65. Galadriel's Relic, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. It seems like you got quite angry. Cowles Morin's expression slightly changed at the mocking words of the person next to him. TSK, goddammit. There was nothing he could do. It might be different for the Quadratus guys, but it was a bit hard for him to do whatever he pleased against the sightseers here. Everyone here were at least the clansmen of the 12 roots. They might be weaker than him, but they have cards up their sleeves. And he couldn't really say anything since he was the one who suggested this. This will probably last as a debt. He would need to pay the debt off no matter what it took. Damned bastards. They said the second part was more important than the first part as well. The second part, where they explore the insides of the calamity fish, was much more meaningful than the first part. The clansmen would not have come here without any plans. A captain of the shock troopers from one of the clans of the 12 roots looked at Cowles Morin and spoke while laughing. Anyways, it seems we can see it now. Big ships are indeed better. They're faster too. Cowles Morin did not reply and instead looked at the 500-man ship in the distance. Though that guy had started out first, the ships made by the ferry were faster if they were larger. Shall we try throwing some spears since it's a bit boring? We need something to enjoy instead of the first part of the sightseeing. He then proceeded to lift up few tens of giant spears and the people, including Cowles Morin, made cynical laughs. Hansu, who had created the hardening liquid using all the materials and had stored it within stared at the giant wall that he had arrived at. A huge body that seemed like a wall. Unlike before, when it only had its fins up above the surface, it had floated up to the point where one could see its sides. As well as the breathing hole on the side of it. With this you can tell that it's not just a fish. A huge hole on the side that was usually closed tight with muscles but opened and it came above the surface. The breathing hole was small in comparison to its whole body, but it was still huge enough for the 500-man ship to go through. Hansu mumbled inwardly as he looked at the breathing hole on the side of its body. I have to go in through this place, right? Camille had told him before he left. Camille made a bitter expression as she spoke. Since she had gained a huge loss because the lack of this single intel. The ones who live in the breathing hole are dangerous, but the mouth which the calamity fish breathes in and out of has tornadoes and huge waves crashing upon it. At that time something flew over at an extreme speed along with a very loud noise from behind. Qua! A single spear that had an extreme amount of force. As if numerous skills were integrated into it, the spear was traveling across the distance of over a kilometer with a large amount of force. It seemed like it was going to puncture right through the ship. But Hansu didn't deflect the spear that targeted the ship and just dodged it. Kududaduk. As if the 3m long spear was proving that traveling over 1 kilometer of distance and still hitting the target wasn't pure luck, it put a hole right through the deck and even into the bottom of the ship. Kurururu. The toxic water started to enter through the hole on the bottom. Papa Pang. A few Gwesh balloons burst and caused the ship to sink a little bit, but this problem would be solved if he shoved a few seeds down below. But Hansu just left the ship that was sinking bit by bit. He just focused on advancing forward into the breathing hole. It'll be troublesome to earn suspicions by getting it to float again. Hansu looked towards the cruise ship from the top of the ship, which was sinking slowly but was still advancing forwards. No matter how strong somebody was, it was hard to throw a spear that could travel this huge distance. The spear that Hansu had just seen had 6 skills applied to it. And they would have used a few more skills to shoot it over here as well. Kal's Morin did not have such skills as these. If he had them, then he would have used them already. Which meant that the people on that cruise ship decided to go along with Kal's Morin. Boom! Boom! Spears were flying in repeatedly. The mast broke off and the decks were smashed apart. During that time the giant cruise ship proved the fact that it wasn't slow just because it was large and slowly closed the gap towards Hansu. It seemed at a glance that there were over 200 people aboard. Kal's Morin alone was troublesome. But Hansu laughed. Since it was better the more there was. Hansu shoved the information of the skills of each person into his head as much as he could. The information of artifacts at the same time as well. It'll still be troublesome if they catch up though. I'll make you a bit busy. It'll be troublesome once they got on. He needed to make some distance. Hansu took out something from his pockets. It'll be bad for me if it got released too fast. I'll cover it a bit with the mucus. Hansu covered something with Kikinon's mucus sacs, which melted quite well in toxic waters, and then threw it into the sea. Kurururu. The mucus started to sink into the toxic waters while melting slowly. Hansu left behind the thing that was sinking behind the ship as he proceeded into the breathing hole. And as soon as he entered the crossroads inside the breathing hole, he abruptly changed direction as he moved towards a location that couldn't be seen from the outside. I've arrived fine for now. The thing I do after this is important. Hansu made a small torch out of the materials he had brought and then started to light the Gwesh balloons which he pulled out from the lower parts of the ship. Tong ta tong. As he got the fire near a balloon that was full of gas, the seed exploded in the air as it disappeared without a trace and the smoke was swept up by the storm. Like wind swirling inside the breathing hole. As the balloons that filled up the ship started to disappear, Hansu's ship started to sink quickly towards the deep underwater passages below the breathing hole. TSK. He got in first. Nav Om Kal's Morin made a regretful expression as he looked at the ship that went in first. Chase. The speed of that guy's ship was slowing down. If they chase at this pace, then they'll be able to catch him fast. At that time something crashed into the side of their ship. Boom. Yuk. Qua. Kal's Morin made an annoyed expression at the unexpected crash as he ran towards the side of the ship and looked down. It's hard to clearly sense below the toxic waters. Annoying. The toxic waters had some weird substances mixed into it, and as such it was extremely hard to see and sense what was coming towards them. Kal's Morin grinded his teeth after looking down at the sea from the side of the ship. Kraken. Why is this coming out here? Kal's Morin and the other tourists made annoyed expressions as they started to pour down a storm of skills downwards. Kraken. Though it was only a terrifying monster in the movies, the problem was that the way it looked, the size of its body and its abilities were similar to that of the movie. But everyone here were at the level of heroes who beat up those beasts in those movies and beyond. Quadudaduck. Kududaduck. After dealing with it madly for a moment, it had already got lost from the sight of the ship. As Jaisu told them, the structure inside was quite complicated, so it'll be hard to catch him once he escapes through the crossroads in the breathing hole. He wouldn't have been able to get far since the ship was sinking bit by bit. Cal's Morin grinded his teeth as he chased that guy's ship and then proceeded into the breathing hole. We'll keep chasing. Wait. Wait a moment. Mr. Cal's Morin. One of the other tourists spoke out after looking at the excited Cal's Morin. We need to keep our agreement. We played chase on the way because our paths were the same as that brat, but we do not want to waste time. We aren't all here to play right. Damnable bastard. Cal's Morin frowned, but he could not really say anything back because those words weren't wrong. Cal's Morin breathed in and out. His anger had calmed down a bit on the way here. His vacation ended here. He had to accomplish his mission here. And in the current situation they had no way of knowing which way Hansu had gone out of the countless crossroads. Though they might be able to find him if they chased, but there was no reason for them to waste their time and help. I had to catch him before he got into the breathing hole. I'll kill you after we get out. Jaisu took a glance at Cal's Morin as he kept manipulating the controls of the ship. Kaiawak. The parasites, who lived and bred in the breathing hole, screamed and assaulted the people as they jumped down. But the tourists simply ripped them apart or burned them off as if they were nuisances. Jaisu frowned after thinking of what had happened before. We struggled that hard. After passing through numerous crossroads, a much more different road than the ones so far appeared. Jaisu looked towards the people who were mumbling about and then spoke cautiously. Is it really fine? It's really dangerous. Once they go left from here, various organs including the lungs of the calamity fish would appear. Though parasites such as the ones just now existed there too and the roads were complicated, it was still very easy in comparison to that of the other side. On the other hand, if they go right from here then the stomach comes out. No. Can you even call that a stomach? Jaisu shook his head. The 118 of them who were with Camille had accidentally entered that place. And only 2 of them survived and escaped it. Cal's Morin mocked them. Are you comparing us to you and the others? Go in. The other tourists laughed out loudly as well. At the same time their expressions were full of excitement. So the treasure vault is in there, huh? The sword that the Jaisu guy was holding on. That was the reason why the people here had gathered. For the forgotten artifacts that would be inside Calamity Fish. That guy had told them that he barely managed to kill a few specters on the outskirts while dealing with them, and had brought out the sword of the thing that looked like a common soldier. But it was still that amazing. Wouldn't they be able to gain much better things? Squirm squirm. As they turned into the right crossroad, a large hole that was covered in muscles could be seen. The giant muscle door that seemed like a mouth from one angle and like an anal sphincter from another expanded and contracted in size, but its original size was so big that their giant ship could still go through it even when it contracted. The tourists gulped their saliva. A dark curtain swayed between the muscle door. Then. I shall go in. Jaisu lead the ship towards the dark curtain skillfully. Cha-ak. The people frowned at the feeling of the strange material passing through their skin, but their words could not leave their mouths after seeing the scene in front of their eyes. Ha! The strange space that existed within the Calamity Fish was much larger and wider than the Calamity Fish itself. Especially the marble that seemed like it was burning that was stuck somewhere up high in the distance. A single giant marble was letting out a white light from high above the sky as it lit up every corner of the space. The space that the light shone onto had numerous rubbles of a crushed city and ripped tree roots covering it. The sea below was so deep that the bottom could not be seen, and above that billions of tons of city debris were stacked on top of each other to create a giant land. It felt like they were gazing upon a humongous trash island. City. No, it seems like it almost ate up a country. Who was living here? The people spoke out in gloom. This wasn't just an organism. There was no way a normal organism could have a space such as this inside them. They were wondering what the strange feeling they had felt when they went through the dark curtain was, but it seemed like it was a feeling that they crossed over to another space. In the distance, tens of kilometers away, something opened as light poured in. It seemed like the calamity fish started to drink up. The people spoke out in gloom as they saw the waterfall like water, rubble that rushed back and forth, and the corpses of various beasts. It seems like we can't go out towards that direction. The people made a slightly nervous expression but just shook their heads. Well, if we get in trouble then we can just run out through the hole we came in on the ship. Hadn't Jisoo run away like that as well? Though it might be a bit dangerous. Would they have come here without a plan? They had all come because there was a method despite the dangers. They had even brought the with them. Which meant their clans had cared about this that much. Land the ship. Kududaduk. Soon the ship made grinding noises as it landed on the giant trash stacks. Don't get too far ahead and let's deal with the outskirts first. Don't do any daring things that far exceed your skill level. We have to be careful. They shouted loudly but were nervous as well. Then they started to slowly get off the ship. They should have arrived around now. Hansu, who had arrived at a crossroad from the direction opposite to that of Jisoo's party, calculated the time as he prepared to move. If he were to move now then he will arrive at the right time. Though I'm thankful that you guys are fighting against Galadriel's army. You should try a bit harder if you are doing it anyways. The army of, one of the 5 great tiger generals * of Elvenheim who had failed in the process of killing the calamity fish, had been cursed to roam in here for eternity. And they were guys Hansu had to get through in order to smash apart the core. Scratching around the outskirts was not enough. Those guys needed to fight a bit more desperately. Hansu poured in the guesh seeds into the bottom of the sunken ship. Shall I go play with some fire? Soon the ship started to float up slowly and Hansu controlled the ship like a submarine and headed towards the dark curtain that was connected to its stomach. Translators note 5 great tiger generals. A title given to 5 tiger-like generals from Romance of the 3 Kingdoms. Usually I wouldn't have put in a note clarifying vocab but it sounded cool. Go away proofreaders note regular chapter 2/3. Sorry for being a day late. Next regular chapter coming tomorrow as usual. Some clarifications. I think that following Camille's safe path, he should have turned left. Instead he followed Jisoo and turned right towards the stomach, into where Camille went with Jisoo as part of the 118 people group on her second attempt. Chapter 66. Galadriel's Relic, 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kududaduk. Strange-looking soldiers were heading towards the tourists who had set up camp with the ship as the center. Soldiers with strange helmets and armor. One thing was clear, that they were not human. They looked more like the elves from storybooks. Though they had the look of a ghoul due to their skin having been pickled in toxic waters and their whole body being a mess. Damn it. Why did these things get killed in such an extreme location? Hundreds of soldiers from the Spectre army were charging towards them while swinging their blades. Cal's Morin sent out explosive flames in all directions. Boom. The flames have exploded out as the bodies of the specters were shredded apart. Splash. But the shredded pieces of the corpses that were scattered around the toxic waters started to squirm as they began to slowly piece themselves back together. Cal's Morin frowned as he looked at this scene. Fuck. Unlike the curses that came out of his mouth, Cal's Morin's wasn't feeling that bad. Since it wasn't labor without a prize. Let's see. Cowles Morin walked over happily and held up the axe the spectre was holding. Hururik. The axe that was covered in the mana reinforcement of blazed up as it created an intense red edge. Chwak. Cowles Morin swung the axe in a wide arc and the spectres who were charging at him were dismembered into pieces. Cowles Morin made a content expression after looking at that scene. Since the guys who were difficult for him to smash apart with his scarlet jade orb were getting cut apart. If I take a bunch of these and arm them, the overall power of the whole clan will rise incredibly. Of course the other clansmen here would take some for their own clans but he couldn't do anything about them. He could not fight with these guys unless he wants to start up a war. That was a problem to be solved after getting out. The ones charging at me first. Cowles Morin then dismembered the ones who were charging at him and started to take the weapons of the ones he had skills. And the other clansmen were doing the same thing also. They started to madly take the relics with greedy hands. Though their numbers were only a mere 200, these guys were strong people who stood out in the red zone. Though the army with hundreds of spectres were strong and seemed immortal, those things were quite lacking to obstruct them. But Jaisu grew nervous and then shouted out. You need to fight a bit more quietly. If you make loud noises then they'll all gather here. Then the captain of the shock troopers of the 6th Route shouted. I don't think it'll be much of a nuisance even if all of these guys come over here. Ha 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 ha. Jaisu frowned. Damn. I told them that these guys were just small fries. The cause of the massacre of their 118 people were not these guys. Since they were quite excited when fighting these guys as well. But Jaisu shook his head. The current situation was indeed much different from before. Since these guys were strong to the point where they couldn't be compared to him. Though these guys were scary, he was quite at ease having them in a strange space like this. Well. We can just run away on the ship if it becomes different. His mind was at ease when he looked at the giant cruise ship. He had never heard of a case where a 2,000-man cruise ship got smashed apart. Though making that thing was hard, it was something that guaranteed their safety above the sea. But at that moment Jaisu frowned. Ha! There were bubbles sprouting up from behind the cruise ship. And then sounds of waters clashing were heard as something started to slowly come above the surface. Jaisu frowned after he saw this. Ship. That was Hansu's disappeared ship. By the time Jaisu figured out the identity of the ship clearly, Hansu's 500-man ship had long gotten near their cruise ship. They couldn't really do anything about it anyways. The ship which had hid its presence under the toxic waters had gotten close way too long ago. But Jaisu didn't panic and instead a corner of his mouth curled up. I wondered where you had hidden to. Is this the hidden card you had up your sleeve? Jaisu laughed because he was flabbergasted. The other clansmen had taken a glance at the ship as well but there wasn't anyone who ran over to do anything about it. Of course it was hard to stop a ship that was coming in with that much force and they didn't really have spare leisure due to the fight but the main reason they ignored it was because they thought that the charging ship wasn't that big of a deal. Boom! And soon the 500-man ship crashed into the 2,000-man ship. Crack! The side of the 2,000-man cruise ship got pushed in with the sounds of wood breaking. But that was it. It had been pushed in a bit on the side but it wouldn't be a problem to ride on it. On the other hand the 500-man ship had its whole front part smashed apart. Jaisu laughed after looking at this. This is the expected outcome. The difference of durability between 500-man and 2,000-man ships was very large. And maybe it was due to the fact it came while submerged in water but it was quite slow as well. How could something like that smash apart the cruise ship? At that time something flew into the 500-man ship. What is that? A torch. The torch that had been thrown from somewhere in the toxic sea spun in the air as it flew into the bottom part of the ship. Boom. A humongous explosion occurred as it swallowed up both the 500-man and 2,000-man ships. Boom. Hansu gazed at the exploded ship in the distance. Tens of thousands of Gwesh balloons that were filled with toxic gases. It might have been different underwater, but when tens of thousands of it exploded above the surface, a huge explosive force was generated. Quadudaduk. As the sound and the smoke from the explosion faded away, the result of the explosion was shown. Chook. The 500-man ship had disappeared into dust, and the giant cruise ship had the huge portion of the side, where the 500-man ship was, blown apart. It was quite amazing that the giant cruise ship hadn't been cut in half from that explosion, but the fact that it could not be used anymore was the same as if it was cut in half. And as if the magic on the cruise ship had been dispelled, the ship that had been giving off a faint amount of light was now the same as a piece of wood that was covered in soot. Goddamit. Hey! Keep the formation. Don't panic. We're getting pushed back. Chaotic voices could be heard from the distance. Hansu laughed as he heard this. One of them is done now. There was no way that these cautious guys would have come here with just this. A piece of the countless leaves that had once covered the vast branches of the world tree that was extremely hard to acquire now. If one uses this, then they'll be able to escape along with a few people around them no matter where they were. Even if the space was distorted. The power of the world tree was that great. But there was one thing that these guys didn't know about. The Elvenheim army that had become specters after getting trapped within the stomach of the calamity fish. The time period of when the Elvenheim was fighting against the 5 great calamities was said to be a time period where there were countless amounts of leaves on the world tree. Each person would have at least 3 to 4 for emergencies. And unlike the small piece of leaf today which had a lot of restrictions on movement and the amount of people they can take, the ones they had back then could take one anywhere they wanted in the world tree because it was a whole piece. Were the Elvenheim dumb enough to get caught within the calamity fish? The 5 great calamities were creatures that were born after taking into account the Elvenheim. They'll need to fight a bit harder now. But then he needed to do one other thing. Since they won't struggle with all their strength if there is a hole to run away to. Hansu slowly swam towards the muscle door that was covered by the dark curtain. Since it was hard to make, I should use it properly. Hansu saluted towards the future alchemists who had created this recipe with all their brainpower as he applied the hardening liquid onto his sword and started to madly swing it towards the muscle door. This doesn't feel right. Let's get out. The small number of people who had come from the 7th route nodded as they gathered in one place. And one of them very cautiously pulled out something from their pockets. A miraculous piece of leaf that was almost dried up but still had some life remaining. It was named the because it allowed one to move around freely. The man clenched the fist with the feather inside it. Crackle. The moment the leaf was destroyed, a strange power surrounded them. Who? It's alright though. We made profit since we gathered up almost 30 relics. Let's go get some girls after we get out. There will be quite a lot of pretty ones out of the newcomers. The ones who lived in the other verse are too overbearing that taking them. Ha. Ha. Who? The guys who were chatting with relaxed expressions suddenly made confused expressions. A green light had covered them up. Which meant that the feather had activated properly. They should not still be here. But the scene in front of them had remained the same. Ha! Why isn't it working? Damn it! What is this? The other people, who had similar thoughts as them, were making noises of panic from all around. Cow's Morin grinded his teeth, then ran up to Jaisu and growled at him after grabbing hold of his neck. Ignore everything else for now. What do we do? Kukuku. Pardon. How do we get out of this damned place? Kuhuk. You just need to swim towards the entrance we came through. And wait until the calamity fish gets near land and then escape like that. Cow's Morin's rage diminished a little after hearing those words. As I expected. If they stay here, then they will all die. The situation is much graver than before. Since the Spectre army was madly charging at them after hearing the explosion. But their survival chance will increase by a large amount if they go through the dark curtain and then escape from the calamity fish once it nears land. From what he heard, it seems like the army over there could not get through the dark curtain. If they do this, then there wasn't even a need to swim over to land. Keep up the formation and continue fighting. Head towards the dark curtain. The dark curtain was quite a distance away, but they could throw planks on the water and cross it. Damn! They're really strong. Stronger and stronger ones were coming, as if the ones before were jokes. At that moment the dark curtain thrashed back and forth. To be precise, the gigantic muscle door that went around the dark curtain squirmed. Kuwung. And at that moment a strange vibration was felt along with a scream-like noise. At that moment the muscles furiously contracted as the hole disappeared instantly. Fuck. What is this? The people fell in panic. The hole they were going to escape through had disappeared. And the specters, which were armed from head to toe, were walking towards them. If there weren't any unexpected events, then they would have felt good for the gear they'll receive after killing these guys, but the situation was completely different. They had to now continuously fight those things without any escape routes. They would have tried to sustain it on a boat if they had one, but it has already been quite a while since that boat had been smashed apart. Let's hurry and find a different exit. Damn it. Cals Morin, who was shouting loudly at the people nearby, quickly backed off at the feeling of something ripping through the air and flying towards him. At the same time he activated every single skill he had along with the secret skill of the Scarlet Jade Orb, Scarlet Jade, and poured them onto the attack flying towards him. Boom! Kuhuk! Cals Morin stared at the thing that had smashed through his mana reinforcement and even his red jade and given him a deep wound with an expression of disbelief. For a captain of the shock troopers of Lighthouse to be wounded like this from a casual swing. You are the captain, huh? Cals Morin grinded his teeth while looking at the huge spectre knight that had run over to them, which it had done so after hearing the loud noise of the explosion, and had swung the strange-looking sword. Hansu, who had been submerged under water using Ahal's breath, stared at Galadriel's army that started to gather up. He had to smash apart the heart in order to kill the calamity fish. The path on the way to the would be easy if Camille were to lead him, but there are numerous unknown factors on the way. But on the other hand, if he were to break the sun like marble in the sky, and get to the heart after weakening the calamity fish, the work at the heart would be much easier. But there was something he needed to kill in order to smash that core. The thing that Cals Morin was fighting currently. The pride of Elvenheim, who tried to smash apart the core and kill the calamity fish but had instead gotten cursed and trapped within this place. He was fighting with Cals Morin and the others, but the moment one attacks the core, then it'll quickly run over and start attacking them. I have to turn that thing into a mess before I continue. He couldn't kill it since it was immortal within this place, but he just needed to buy time to break the core apart. If he succeeded, then the rewards, other than the calamity fish, were great. Unlike the common forgotten sword, the weapon Galadriel had in his hand was not a normal weapon. A relic for which all of the alchemists of Elvenheim had combined all their efforts in order to create. It will make his next objective much easier. I should move now too. He wasn't quite satisfied yet. He needed to be much more diligent in order to make sure that not a single unexpected event happens. Hansu glanced back and forth between the clansmen and the army of Galadriel, who were pushing each other back and forth and then started to swim. Translator's note: he. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 3/3. Some clarifications. So instead of heading straight to the heart with Camille's route, and have a hard time there, Hansu decided to destroy the core in the stomach with the generous help of his pursuers, making his task at the heart easier and getting more rewards. Also, it's really Galadriel and not Galadriel as in LOTR. Although it's probably a reference. Chapter 67. Galadriel's Relic, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Hansu mumbled quietly towards a different curtain in the distance. There is only one hole for these guys to escape through. There were numerous holes like the ones they had come through around the stomach of the calamity fish. But in this huge space, they had to cross an enormous amount of land in order to get to a different hole. If the other guys wanted to get out of here, then they'll aim for that hole in the distance without doubt. I'm going to go wait for them. Hansu made bubbling noise as he swam down below the surface of the water. Kudududuck. Damn it. Lark, one of the clansmen from the 7th root, grinded his teeth. 50 strong people, including Cals Morin, were gathered in the distance and were barely holding back the Spectre Knight. Fuck. We can't beat something like that. Every time that knight swung its strange sword, the air split apart as the bodies of the people who were fighting him got cut apart. Though they could hold him back for now, their injuries were slowly increasing in magnitude as time went on. This was quite obvious actually. How could they beat these guys who kept on coming back alive? And another big problem. The Spectre soldiers and generals were slowly gathering towards them. The ones who were roaming around this vast land were quickly charging towards them. Others might not know, but Lark, who was a captain of the shock troopers, knew. Countless number of specters were heading into the range in which he could sense up to. They could hold back for now, but they'll eventually be crushed by numbers if this went on. They had to look for a chance. But at that moment a chance appeared. Boom! The Spectre Knight and generals around it flew back along with a huge explosion. It seems like Cals Morin and the people around him had done something. Thanks to them, the attention of the Spectre soldiers and generals which they were fighting against had been redirected towards the location of the explosion. This is it. When Lark hinted with his eyes, a group of people poured every bit of skills they had as they ran away between the debris. Those sons of bitches. Stop. Angry voices were heard behind them, but Lark ignored it. They had no reason to die with everyone over there. Kuhuhu. Just hold on to that monster well over there. The location he would run towards had been set up already. There were definitely other holes. He looked around the surroundings as soon as he came in. Since his skill allowed one to observe extreme distances. And another entrance had come into his vision while he was using this. Yeah. There's no way that only a single hole exists in this giant creature. They started run on the shore where they were least likely to get surrounded on. And he sighed in relief. If we go on like this, then we can survive. Those specters continued to block their way, but the faster ones had already run off to the battlefield, so the remaining specters were soldiers who were quite slow. Though it was hard to go through them since they were quite vast in numbers and their injuries were increasing because of this, but it seemed like that all 14 of them will be able to safely reach the hole at this pace. And the thing that helped their escape. It's really quite nice. They smiled as they looked at the relics in their hands. Every time they swung the weapons, the air split apart and armors smashed into pieces. Of course the specters had these weapons as well, but the weapon will change depending on the user. They were much stronger than the specter soldiers. After a long time of running while smashing and killing, they had already approached the exit. They just needed to cross the sea between the dark curtain and the debris now. And that was a very simple thing to do. Let's cross by throwing on some planks. Captain. While the others were full of glee, Lark, who was the captain of the shock troopers of the 7th root, flinched momentarily. He then stopped everyone and then pointed towards a direction. Everyone flinched momentarily, but then understood Lark's meaning as they started to pour skills towards the direction he pointed. Boom! Though they were still tired, their skills were still very mighty due to their power levels being the top of those in the red zone, and the 8 explosive and long-range skills endlessly smashed apart the location Lark pointed towards. Then something came out from between the debris which had turned into dust. And Lark, who had been watching this, chuckled. It was you. You bitch. Whoa, your personality isn't really the best, is it? Attacking without a warning. You crazy bastard. Think of what you've done. That guy had smashed their ship. And then he had closed up the muscle door somehow. The reason why people were getting massacred over there and the reason why they had run away even in the middle of a life-threatening danger was all because of the things that this guy had done. Wait. Lark stopped after thinking to this point. If this guy had come here before them, then he can close the dark curtain over there also. Since a guy who had closed it once could probably do it again. You bastard. What are you thinking of? Lark was a person who could not bear his curiosity. The reason why he had asked to go in here was because he was curious about the insides of the calamity fish. Lark stopped the attacks of everyone and then asked Hansu. But then Hansu just shrugged his shoulders. Why do you need to know that? Come at me. Lark chuckled at these words. Is this guy crazy? They were indeed weaker than Cow's Morin. But there was a reason why Cow's Morin had to handle them carefully. They were weaker than Cow's Morin, but they had 14 people and were equipped with relics. They were in a mess because they were running away from specters, but if that guy's level was exactly as he heard from Cow's Morin, then they shouldn't bicker around like this. Lark erased the smile from his hands and then just charged at Hansu after enveloping his whole body with skills. There was no need to drag time in this place. Clean him up before the specters get here and then leave. The in Lark's hands smashed onto Hansu. Boom! The elf fire made a huge noise as it lit up the surrounding area on fire. But Lark couldn't laugh after hitting Hansu. No, he was actually frightened at something that was clenching onto his wrist very tightly. Kududuk. Yuk. Yuwak. Captain. The clansmen, who were leisurely jogging towards their captain, heard Lark scream and then dashed over. A voice came from within the smoke towards them. I'm showing this to you guys first. Because I can't use it at any time. Due to a lot of limitations. A light flashed from within the smoke created by the elf fire. Boom. Die. You bastard. Cow's Morin smashed the Spectre Knight that was running towards him into bits. Crack. Though his right arm had flown off from the Spectre Knight's attack, he had been able to smash it to bits. But Cow's Morin's expression was still very grim. You wah. God damn it. Cow's Morin screamed out in despair after seeing the specters charging at him from all directions. During the time when he was dealing with the Spectre Knight, a large amount of the Spectre soldiers and captains had surrounded them. And the other clansmen who had seen Lark and his men run away started to steal glances as they started to run towards that direction too. God damn it. It's all because I had to deal with a thing like that. Wouldn't Cow's Morin have wanted to get out of here as well? But the 50 people in front of him, and himself, could not escape. Since the moment you turn your back to escape, the Spectre Knight's sword would cut you into two. Fuck. Anyways. We still killed it. Cow's Morin trampled onto the pieces of the Spectre Knight as if he was venting out his anger on them. The pieces were squirming as they were slowly gathering back into one. Damn. This isn't the time for this. Cow's Morin organized his thoughts. He had to run away at this moment when the Spectre Knight couldn't get him. A sword came into Cow's Morin's view as he spat on the ground. The strange-looking sword that the Spectre Knight had been using. I should take that. Damn it. Let's get out, everyone. The 30 of them who had turned into a mess grinded their teeth as they ran. There was only one thing they wanted at this moment. Damn it. I hope the ones who run away cleared the road properly. They wanted to rip apart the ones who had ran away ahead of them, but they also wanted them to have left his place safely. Since there would be hope for them as well if the others had escaped. If the other guys had failed, then the chances of them dying was also very high. Urhup. Clear the road. Keep applying heals. The surviving theory smashed apart the specters as they struggled intensely. It seems that Cow's Morin's battle was so intense to the point that it attracted every specter around this area. Damn. It seems like everyone would just die here no matter how many they have. Cow's Morin was actually curious. To as if taking control of the calamity fish from the inside was possible if they were able to come in like this. There were a few people who had left behind legendary achievements in the red zone. He had wondered if it would be possible with the power of his and theirs combined, but he realized that it was impossible after seeing this. How could they kill the calamity fish if they didn't even know what to do in order to kill it and had to fight this zombie army in the process of doing so? Cals Morin madly poured mana into his sword as he slashed apart the Spectre army. After a while of crazily smashing through the road, the surroundings had cleared up a bit. Cals Morin sighed in relief, since he could start to see the dark curtain in the distance. Just run a bit more. We can live. The people heard Cals Morin's shouts as they started to swing the sword in all directions. But the people who were running could only stop and watch. Corpses that were spread everywhere. And the relics that were dropped. A familiar face was sitting on top of those. Kong Hansu. You bitch. It seems like I'm the villain when I appear at a time like this. But what can I do? I gotta do what I've gotta do. Haha. Cals Morin smirked. It hasn't even been long since this guy had run away from him. Did this guy lose all concept of fear? He had become a mess, but the gap between them was not something that could be closed with just that, and he had also gained a new weapon. Yeah. There's no need for words. Cals Morin, who was about to rush in after pouring strength onto the sword in his left hand, flinched momentarily. Hansu had a slightly different aura from when he had seen him at the lake. Is it because he ate the runes? If he killed all the guys ahead and ate their runes, then that amount would be monstrous. But Cals Morin shook his head. That's not the important part. He was blocking their path when the specters were chasing behind them. Even if the one standing in front of him wasn't Hansu but was one of the 7 departed souls who wore a Hansu mask, he had to kill them anyway, so why did he need to think about it? Damn it. I've got burnt too hard back then from this guy. Whop. Cals Morin poured in mana into the sword and then swung it at Hansu. He then covered his whole body with the and then stretched the formless blade of the newly gained sword and stabbed Hansu in the heart. Kududuk. Ha. I worried for nothing. Cals Morin smirked as he saw his sword penetrate that guy's heart. Though there was a sensation of something getting in the way at the edge of his hand, but the sword he had obtained was of such a good quality to the point where it just went right through the thing in the way and stabbed into his heart as if it was tofu. But Cals Morin's thoughts stopped there. Kudududuk. Since Hansu smashed his heart, it seems like the scales get penetrated right through. The relic really is well made. Anyways, thanks for the delivery. Cool. His consciousness started to quickly fade away after his heart was crushed. As long as you are human, you will die if your heart gets crushed. No matter how high your runes are or what kind of skills you have. And because of this, Cals Morin could not understand. That I smashed his heart. How is he alive? That guy looked way too fine for having his heart crushed. No, it actually seemed like that he had shown him his own heart in order to pull him in. Then he realized what the strange feeling that had gotten in his way was. He had felt this before. He had felt this a long time ago, when he was against the demon race on the central island. As the sword that was stabbed onto his heart got pulled out, he could see 3 hearts. Racial metamorphosis. Damnable bastard. Your reinforcement is horrid enough, you also have a bitch-like special skill. Cals Morin's consciousness faded away with that. Hansu then looked towards the sun. Like marble in the sky. Clear everything here before the time is up and then get to the core. He then jumped towards the 30 fatigued people. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. Elf fire could also be translated as death fire. Since there are elves, I chose elf fire as the most likely translation. Since Hansu's reinforcement comes from a demonic dragon, its special skill seems to allow him to share parts of its morphology like the scales of a dragon or the 3 hearts of demons. Is there a reason for killing everybody? Is it just for runes and equipment? Or to create backlash against Quadratus from the clans? Will Aelin survive? Chapter 68. Cataclysm 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reinforcements were basically imitations. Something that helped a human imitate something stronger than them. There were reinforcements created from imitating beastmen, and there were reinforcement which imitated an intense flame like the scarlet jade orb. Some were created after imitating a tiger, and some were created to imitate lightning. Of course there were exceptions, but most were like that. Because of this the special skills were basically, and due to this the main point of the special skills were set. Becoming the exact thing that you want to become. And Hansu's speciality was related to this. If he learns a skill, then he receives the intentions and experiences of the creator or the user of that skill and assimilates it. He can understand the skill better than anyone, increase the mastery of the skill quickly, and become closer than anyone else to the one who has mastered it before. And the result in which such specialty and special skill combine to create. Boom. Kawak. A clansman flew into the distance after getting his whole body crushed by Hansu's kick. Damned bastard. Die. Another clansman charged towards Hansu after covering themselves with skills from head to toe. Damned monster. They had all been killed by that guy. Damn it. When did this get tangled up like this? They had thought that they could just watch the newcomers die and take back the relics, but for something like this to happen. Kierik. Hansu's reinforcement had been cut apart, but they could not get through the scales. Tough scales that showed higher defenses than armors. But the clansmen did not give up. Since they weren't alone. Qua. A clansman who had charged him from behind shoved a great sword into the location where he had cut apart with his dagger. Crack. A crack had appeared on the translucent scales. And at the same time a rough noise was heard as the great sword got shoved in towards Hansu's chest. Kudududuck. But only that far. The great sword could not smash apart the ribs by the chest. A clansman who saw this was shocked. No way. No matter how high a person's resistance is, there is still a limit to the durability of humans' bones. But that bone was so hard that the blade of the great sword could not even leave a scratch on them. Kudududuck. Of course there was no need worry further. The moment the formless sword in Hansu's hand flew across the air, the bodies of the two closest people to Hansu had been cut in half. Cool. The two people made groans as they fell. Hansu looked at these guys and then looked at his body, which was full of injuries. The injuries were healing at an extremely fast speed. He looked like a human from the outside, but the insides were totally different. A completely different muscle structure, heart and bones comprised of his body. Unlike humans who would die from getting hit by a sword, the dragon race had barely no weaknesses and had high health, so they survived in much harsher conditions than humans. And because of this they were stronger by at least a few times, even if they had the same amount of runes. Actually, there aren't any races who are weaker than the humans in battle. And especially for those races who had skills made after them, because humans wanted to imitate them. But it's still a bit burdensome. He knew the moment he learnt it. That he couldn't use it all day and all night due to the low amount of masteries. The difference between the demon dragons and a human's body was still too great. Time will solve everything, I guess. Sharurik. Hansu, who had glanced at the extremely thin and transparent layer of scales on him, gathered up the runes on the ground and then collected the most useful artifacts out of the ones dropped on the ground. He would gain the attention of everyone if he were to walk around with these things hanging off his body, but he could just hide them with a cape. This isn't the time to worry about other people's eyes. He could just throw them away if they become nuisances. For the moment he needed to focus on increasing his battle power. Since the biggest hurdle has yet to come. Hansu threw away the he had been using until now and then touched the on his waist. My runes are now at Around 35% if you think about how people take usually 3 years to raise the rune's level to the next rank, then he had raised all at once to the amount he should have gotten after a year of hunting. It would be much easier for him to get around from now on. Quararek. Hansu glanced at the specters charging at him but then looked up towards the core up in the sky. Hansu started to quickly run before the specters arrived on him. Towards the tallest and closest location to the core, which was stacked high with trash and debris. He needed to charge through while Galadriel was dead and was struggling to get back. After climbing up the mountain, the core was in his view. The identity of the core, which was shining like the sun, was revealed. A humongous eye. The eye, which looked quite small on the way, was bigger than the 2,000-man ship. The eye, which was giving off light in all directions, blinked as it stared at Hansu. I have to finish everything within 30 minutes. This was not something he could turn on and off at any moment. Otherwise he would have used it already. He had to smash the core and crush the heart before his transformation ended. Hansu, who had jumped towards the sun-like core, started to raise the tension of his body. Since the Elvenheims hadn't been killed and turned into specters because of no reason. Though there was still quite a bit of distance, there was no problem. Footholds will come down. Hansu then stretched the formless blade of his sword and slashed at the sky. At that moment a change occurred. From the dark curtain that the eye was attached to, tentacles started to pour out viciously. Kadudaduk. Tens of thousands of tentacles. Kadudaduk. The attack Hansu made had cut off hundreds of tentacles, but it couldn't reach the core as it dispersed. This was the defensive system that protected the insides of the Calamity Fish. There was nothing that protected the outer parts of the Calamity Fish, since it had no predators. But as the inside is huge, the protection system for the inside was very well built. The tentacles that swim through the veins of the Calamity Fish will come out from the corners of the body if they deem an invader to be harmful to stop them. Like a white blood cell in humans. If he had gone to the heart using a different direction, then he would have still had to deal with these things. That might be more dangerous for him who had a limit to the time of his transformation. Well, this place isn't really safe either. Here, the core, one of the main part of the body, there was dozens and hundreds of times more tentacles than in other parts of the body. And the heart has even more. I need to finish it quickly. The amount of tentacles that were surrounding his body were much more in numbers than the ones he could see with his eyes. Though he had about 30 minutes left for his transformation, Hansu calculated that he had about 15 minutes instead. He had to smash the core and crush the heart within this time period. If not, then he will just get shredded apart by the tentacles that roam around the veins. No, he wouldn't really be shredded apart. He will just become like the specters below. He will become a calamity greater than Galadriel and then be reborn as a sturdy shield that will protect the Calamity Fish. Chwerararuk. Hansu spread the hardening liquid onto his whole body and then applied them onto his blade. He then proceeded to swing in all directions. Chwerararuk. His body, which had turned like a demonic dragon's, endlessly supplied Galadriel's relic with mana. His magic force spread into hundreds of strands due to the relic, took a bit of the hardening liquids and then attacked the tentacles. Kadudaduk. The tentacles screamed and squirmed as they were scratched from the formless blades. Then they turned like stones as they fell to the ground. The hardening liquid, which was made from the combined efforts of the alchemists, was like a fatal poison to them. Though it had been created with the Kukulja extract as the basis, but the effect could not even be compared to it. Hansu madly slashed his sword as he proceeded forward by stepping onto the tentacles. Kududuk. The scales on his whole body got shredded off and his limbs repeated the process of getting broken and healing back. There were a few occasions where he almost fell down when the tentacles that acted as footholds disappeared, but there were simply too many tentacles coming at him. Hansu stepped atop the petrified tentacles as he continued to proceed towards the core. Chururek. After slashing continuously, the giant eye had come close enough to him to the point where it was within his range. I've arrived. The eye glared at Hansu as if it wanted to shred him apart, but there was nothing it could do, since its only job was to create and maintain this space. Quadaduk. A tentacle which flew in from afar broke through his ribs and then crushed his heart. Hansu could see the eye smile. But Hansu also laughed towards the eye. Laugh as much as you want. Chikunk. Hansu, who had cut apart the tentacle which had penetrated through his heart, stepped on top of it as he jumped over. Then he used all the strength in his body and stabbed the eyeball. You brats! What are you doing? Grab onto the tree. Camille Rowe frowned as she looked at the people running around on the ground. On the waist of the newcomers an extremely tough-looking rope was tied onto them. One of the newcomers who were tying on the rope that were tied onto the trees spoke out in dissatisfaction. Damn it! Shouldn't we be finding a ship during this time to run away? Or combine our strengths to get through the girders? You told us that you would save us, but what is this? Everyone nodded at these words. The giant fish had got close enough to the point where they could see it themselves. What kind of crazy act was this when such a thing was coming to eat them up? Camille spoke as she thought of Hansu. He said to just smack them if they didn't listen right. This was something she excelled at even if Hansu hadn't told her about it. Especially towards the newcomers who didn't realize their situation. Quaduk. Quayak. You bastard. I said to leave if you were going to leave, right? Why do you keep asking me to clear the road for you? Kohuwu. The guy who had made strange groaning noises just started to roll on the floor while grabbing a hold of his stomach. The people glanced at that Camille and then quietly fastened themselves onto the tree. The newcomers, who had linked their body onto the thousands of thick woods in the jungle and to each other, looked towards the distant sea with a worried expression. Actually, Camille was worried also. Since they would all die like this if that guy failed. At that time something happened. Guwang. A scream which was filled with pain resonated throughout the atmosphere. The people trembled in fear, but Camille smiled in joy. I don't know what he did, but he gave a hit. But soon Camille realized why Hansu had told her to hold on to the tree. The calamity fish, which had an expression of pain, started to throw up things. Endlessly. Camille knew what those things were, since she had seen them before. Those are the debris within the stomach. The huge amount of debris that poured out from its mouth dropped onto the sea as tea created a huge tsunami. Camille shouted widely. Hold on. And then the huge tsunami that was created in the distant sea swept onto the root they were standing on. Kaiawak. Black blood was pouring out of the giant core. As the core got damaged, the huge space that was being sustained by the core started to tremble. At the same time the space shrunk down as the debris within it endlessly started to stab the insides of the calamity fish. Quah! But this won't kill it. Though it was struggling in pain, it will start to heal again once it pukes out everything. The core required the most amount of energy, so it was located nearby the heart and received blood from the biggest artery in its body. Let's end this. If he were to go through this, then he will reach the heart. Hansu clenched his teeth as he jumped into the large artery which the blood was pouring out from. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. Hansu is hardcore. Some may nitpick about how 35% should be in more than 1 year if the ease of hunting is taken into account. But it's probably just a simplification. Chapter 69. Cataclysm, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Kugugugugugu. The sea around the route was in chaos. Michael Christopher, the patriarch of Lighthouse, one of the 6 pillar clans, made an expression of disbelief while looking at this. It's the first time I heard about the calamity fish thrashing about in 20 years. The tsunami created by the calamity fish was sweeping through all directions. The other adventurers of the Red Zone would be making similar expressions as well. Since the fact that the thing that made such a thing thrash about did something close to pushing away a hurricane or a tsunami with their hand. It meant that something affected an existence that humans could not fathom to deal with. What the hell happened inside its stomach? Christopher looked towards the distant sea with a calm expression. Kugugugugu. The artery trembled crazily. The poison that was flowing inside the artery was fatal in itself, but surprisingly the perfectly balanced body of the dragon race withstood the poison while constantly pushing it back out. Hansu made exclamations inwardly. As I expected. Then he thought to himself. That a human's body was truly feeble. The fact that they had survived in the abyss for 50 years with such a body was almost a miracle. No, even if it wasn't just physical, there were still many other things they lacked in. If you look at the fertility rate of the Kakilas, then each person had to kill at least 10,000 to fit the numbers, and their ability to work together was nothing in comparison to the Repron race, who shared the same experience and feelings with each other. They might not be at the level of dragons or demons, but there wasn't a single race weaker than the humans. That's why I've got to do well. Hansu, who had been thinking, clenched his teeth while looking at the tentacles rushing up to him. Was something he would do starting from the orange zone. He just needed to focus on the tasks of the red zone for now. Kudududuk. Ududududuk. Hansu sliced apart the tentacles without stopping and at the same time poured out the hardening liquid in his pouch endlessly. The hardening liquid started to quickly flow out into the torrent-like artery like a small paper boat caught in rapid waters. Kayawak. The tentacles which touched the hardening liquid screamed as they squirmed their entire body. The tens of thousands of tentacles which were charging towards him all turned into stones as soon as they touched the blood of the calamity fish which contained the hardening liquid, as they got crushed as they fell on top of other pieces of tentacles and then turned into dust. Chwaak. Even during this the tentacles acted as if they couldn't leave the invader alone and constantly stabbed into Hansu's body. Kiriririk. The dragon's scales and bones were madly pummeled by the tentacles as they started to crack. Cook. Hansu clenched his teeth at the pain that was pummeling through his entire body. Then he madly used up the regeneration runes he had stolen from the guys earlier. Damn. This is the bad part of my abilities going up. The regeneration runes are something that was set on a human's level, so it could not catch up to the increased health of the demonic dragon race. One of the two hearts that had been crushed had regenerated, but the heart that was crushed from the tentacle earlier had received a curse and was not regenerating. But it was better to swing the sword one more time during the time he would complain. Hansu ruthlessly swung around the Galadriel's relic as he cut up the artery. Hansu, who had been rushing down at an extreme speed, caught his balance while clenching his teeth after looking at the distant light. I've arrived. The fact that there was light meant that he had almost arrived at the which was inside the heart. But that light was quickly covered up by the huge amount of tentacles which had gathered inside the heart. Damned bastard. How does he not get a heart attack by having things like this in his arteries? The size of the heart befit the size of the calamity fish, as it was big as a couple sports stadiums combined. And hundreds of thousands of tentacles were squirming around in this wide space. The heart had prepared for the worst during the time the core was getting attacked. Damn. There's more than I expected. He was scared for a moment. To the point where he thought of retreating for a moment. The tentacles gathered were showing off an oppressive aura. But Hansu clenched down onto his teeth. Bullshit. Once he retreats, then he will have to continue to retreat. If he were to get scared and retreat to prepare himself again, then he will have to continue to go backwards. The few days he had spent preparing for this was regrettable already. When would he climb up if he were to retreat here? Every second was precious, and the faster he moved, the higher the chances of winning as well as enabling him to save more people. Let's go. The tentacles started to rush up to Hansu, who was getting pushed towards them from the blood. It was like hundreds of thousands of herrings charging to catch one measly anchovy. Hansu looked at these things and then opened up the pouch by his waist to the full. This wasn't the time to save things. There wouldn't even be a chance to use this if he failed here. Soon the hardening liquid that he had prepared resonated with the earthquake-like beat of the heart as it spread out quickly. Kayak. The tentacles quickly started to turn into stone. The tentacles turned into stone after touching the larger amount of hardening liquid in comparison to the amount before and broke apart. And Hansu constantly searched for the direction where the light was coming from during this time. Divine stone fragment. A power plant which supplied all the energy throughout its whole body. Logically speaking, how could such a large organism maintain its body by consuming things? This thing didn't even digest the things it ate. It just stored them within the stomach that was maintained by the core. This thing wasn't born to eat something and use the thing it ate. It was a creature born to just devour everything. And the power plant which allowed such an abnormal organism to keep living. The thing which acted as the foundation of the world tree but had now broken into numerous fragments, hid within a part of the 5 calamities and acted as the origin of the energy which allowed them to live on. Something could be seen giving off light in the center of the heart. The thing which was lighting up the entire heart despite being covered up by tens of thousands of ligaments, tubes and mucus. Found it. The divine stone fragment was within that thing. Hansu withstood the attacks of the tentacles as he charged towards the strange cocoon that shrouded the divine stone. Quadaduk. Then he madly started to rip apart tens of meters of cocoon which held the divine stone within. This damned parasite. The divine stone was not something that was created to supply these guys with energy. But they were draining that energy and using it to eat up the world tree. The ligaments and mucus were so tough and sticky to the point that the Galadriel's relic, which could cut anything, had to cut multiple times in order for him to proceed forward. Hansu's remaining 2 hearts madly pumped blood into his whole body. If the powers of his magic force had not multiplied a few times from his transformation into a demonic dragoner or the tentacles had not been swept up by the hardening liquid, then his whole body would have been crushed apart. But even then Hansu's whole body was getting crushed bit by bit from the tentacles stabbing his whole body. Kududaduk. At that moment one of the hearts, which Hansu had painstakingly regenerated, got smashed. Quack. The amount of remaining hearts were now 1. Hansu felt strength draining out of his whole body but then smashed apart the cocoon crazily while clenching his teeth and dodging as many attacks as possible. Bastards. Let's see if you can still fight after your battery runs out. The core, tentacles, and the calamity fish all moved around with the energy from the divine stone as their basis. The divine stone was that mighty. On the other hand, these guys cannot continue to maintain this humongous body once the divine stone was pulled out. About the moment when his left arm was destroyed to the point where it couldn't act as a limb anymore, the cocoon Hansu was slashing it made shredding noises as it ripped apart. Soon a light that looked like small sun stabbed down onto Hansu's body. Quoo! As the cocoon got destroyed and lost its usage, all the energy from the divine stone didn't get absorbed onto the calamity fish and instead burned Hansu's entire body. Hansu focused all of the magic force within his body onto defense and then ruthlessly smashed down onto the ligaments of the cocoon surrounding the divine stone. Once. Twice. As he continued to smash down onto the cocoon, the ligaments started to get cut apart one by one. Tying. And suddenly, the divine stone fell out from the cocoon and then started to quickly sink onto the torrent of the heart. Nope. Hansu quickly tied the divine stone, which was the size of his head, with the cocoon's mucus that he had cut off. After covering it up until it was the size of his whole body, the light started to fade. It might even be due to the fact that the calamity fish's stimulation which was applied to draw out the power disappeared. Anyways, Hansu quickly stored the divine stone into his pouch. Though the divine stone was indeed a stone, it was still something that the Elvenheims had created. It seemed like it could be stored within the pouch. The moment Hansu pulled out the divine stone, the beat of the giant heart slowed down noticeably. Kuwang. At the same time the tentacles slowed down considerably. Since they couldn't handle the huge amount of work after the divine stone, which supplied them with energy like a sun, disappeared. But as if the remaining ones were trying to pour out the remaining bits of their rage, they squeezed out all of their remaining strength as they started to stab down onto Hansu. Pupil. Kohuk. Hansu groaned out loudly from the attacks which smashed onto his whole body. The attacks had become much more fierce since the hardening liquid had dispersed quite a bit. But he could not leave yet. His goal was the calamity fish. But at the same time killing the other ones. He had killed the calamity fish, but there was something he needed to get for the guys after. Calamity fish's offspring. Though the calamity fish was a fish in name, it was closer to a mammal like a whale. And surprisingly the offspring was placed in the heart to mature. It would complete its maturing in the heart where there were plenty of energy from the divine stone. Where is it? Hansu was getting hit all over his body and cut up the tentacles as he searched for the offsprings. And soon he was able to find it. The offspring of the calamity fish which tried to run away somewhere by the arteries of the heart. Though it was a baby, it was so huge that it was larger than whales. Where are you going? You need to give me your heart. Hansu madly swam as he chased it. It would be impossible to beat an aquatic creature within the blood, but that thing's speed had slowed down quite a bit as if it had taken a gulp of the hardening liquid. Hansu rushed up to it and then stabbed his sword onto the back. The offspring thrashed back and forth as it started to smash its body onto the walls of the artery. Kook. Its size was a lethal weapon. Hansu spat out groans as he got crushed between the offspring and the artery wall. But his hands and sword continuously slashed apart its body. At the same time the tentacles which had followed them squeezed out the last bits of their strengths as they smashed Hansu. Hansu clenched onto his teeth and then continued to reach deeper into the body of the offspring. Kuwang. The calamity fish's offspring made a cry of despair, but it could not do anything against an invader within its own body. Hansu shoved his way into its body and then started to cut up the heart. To be precise, the most important seat of the heart. Even if it was just a seed, it was still as big as his head. Hansu cut it up and then breathed out heavily. He had forgotten to breathe because he was fighting so hard. It's done. Since he had acquired the most important material to create the poison with, it was now time to escape. Hansu stored the heart he had cut up and then started to madly swim. But at that time an attack flew up and then smashed Hansu's one remaining heart. Pook. Hansu couldn't even scream out and instead exhaled roughly. When he turned around he could see a few strands of tentacles turning stiff like a rock. A final attack squeezed out from last bits of its strength after getting its energy supply cut off. The curse had been lifted since the calamity fish had died, so the heart started to regenerate, but all three of his hearts were currently injured to the point where they could not function properly. Damn it. It needs to heal enough before my transformation ends. Hansu gazed at the half-smashed heart that was barely working as he started to slowly lose consciousness while clenching his teeth. Soon Hansu's body swept down on the rapid torrents as he quickly disappeared into a corner of the calamity fish. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 1/3. Luckily Hansu got Cow's Marine's artifact allowing him to breathe underwater so he can fall unconscious in the blood of the calamity fish without big repercussions. Tomorrow is April's Fools. Perfect timing for a Hansu's death chapter. Chapter 70. Cataclysm 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey. Hey. Smack smack. Cool. Hansu clutched his head and then got up after feeling somebody slapping his cheeks. It felt like his whole body was getting smashed apart. His transformation had long disappeared. But it seems like I regenerated quite a bit since I'm alive. Hansu quickly regained his senses as he checked the person urgently calling for him. Is it an ally? Or is it Camille? Though he didn't know who it was, but it didn't seem like he was being restrained or was trapped somewhere. Were they just looking over me the whole time? Since it seemed like they left his unconscious body alone, it seemed like they didn't have enmity. But Hansu's expression quickly turned fearsome as he verified the thing which was slapping his cheeks. The fairy smiled while looking at Hansu. Why are you doing that with our relationship? He. What made you to come out all the way out to the red zone? The fairy smiled brightly. We really usually don't come out, but this isn't some everyday event, right? The fairy then looked at the surroundings. The huge calamity fish which had turned into a corpse under Hansu's hands. The fairy spoke with an expression of admiration. Well, you know very well that we make sure to give rewards. But we didn't really think that somebody could kill this, so we don't have any runes or artifacts. We don't really have anything prepared. But then it'll be too sad for our precious friend who struggled this hard, right? So we came to give you a small gift. Then the fairy looked at Hansu as it smiled in glee. Hansu looked at the fairy as he spoke. Strange. It wouldn't really be fun for you guys if I were to get stronger. The fairy clapped at those words. So we pondered for quite a while as to how Mr. Hansu would struggle more and fight more desperately. Then we came into a conclusion. What is it? The fairy smiled as it spoke. Do you want to receive them one by one? Or do you want to receive them all at once? Then the fairy pulled out one of the skills it had brought along. Hansu's eyes trembled after seeing this. Solo numbering skill number 8. It was different depending on the mastery of the skill, but it was an extremely fearsome skill which allowed one to raise the ones who they had killed into specters and allowed the usage of the special skill during the day. An amazing skill which fit the title of solo numbering. He then realized what the fairy meant when it asked him about receiving them one by one or all at once. If you want to receive the reward for killing the calamity fish, then I'll give this to you right now. And every time you kill one more, then I'll give you a skill at a similar level as this. But on the other hand, if you deny this now and fail to kill even one of them, then you won't get anything. It'll be harder too. But if you were to kill them all, then you know, right? That we calculate the reward according to the struggle perfectly, right? Hansu knew what it was implying. And it probably knew also as to what his answer was. I'll see you later. As I expected, I like you because you don't disappoint us, he. Be strong. Hansu shook his head as he looked at the disappearing fairy. Though it seems like he had made his decision on a whim, he actually thought about it a lot. Since the upcoming road he would need to take would be very harsh. If everything rolls out according to his plan and stronger and more influential people learn of the knowledge he knew as the future information slowly got released, the invasion of the abyss will hasten as well. His path was basically a fight against time, during which the chances of the invasion of the abyss being faster than the 5 years of the past was likely. Whether the invasion of the abyss is faster, or him getting from the red zone to the violet zone and waiting for the invasion after finishing his preparation. The previous choice would put him at a disadvantage, and his plans had been set for the latter choice anyways. Doing well until the indigo zone, but not being able to finish the preparations on the violet zone due to the invasion being faster than expectations. This was not succeeding. It was just failure. The amount of time given was a bit too tight for him to proceed safely and prepare perfectly. If you exclude unexpected events, then it meant you needed to reduce as much outside influences and run as fast as possible. Kangti's words suddenly rose up in his head. Anyways, since this is the situation, every skill like that would give Hansu a great amount of strength. But Hansu chose the latter choice. Since he wasn't finished after just clearing the red zone. It would be harder on him during the red zone, but if he succeeds, then the reward would be tremendous. He would have much more freedom in the orange zone. They didn't even have rewards for the calamity fish in the plan of the red zone anyways. No one had killed the calamity fish before. How could he just plan with a notion of here? One always needed to take account of the worst-case scenario when making plans. It's all done then. Hansu got rid of the thoughts of the fairy from his head and then checked his body status. He didn't know how long it had been since he fainted. He needed to check his current situation quickly and then move out. Please. Please be here. Hansu started to check his belongings. Other things were okay, but he could not lose two things. The divine stone fragment was important, but the relic which acted as the was also important. Who? You did good. My unconscious self. After opening his pouch he could see the divine stone firmly encased within the cocoon, and the heart which he had pulled out from the offspring of the calamity fish was there as well. And he was firmly holding onto the Galadriel's relic with his hand. It seems his energy lasted even while he was unconscious. His heart was fully recovered as well. This is good enough. Hansu sighed in relief and then gazed at the divine stone fragment. A fragment which was letting off a blinding white light. Though it was pretty calm now, it would start to pour out a frightful amount of energy once it gets stimulated. Like it had been inside the calamity fish. My overall power level has gotten quite better also. Hansu, who had been staring at the amount of runes that had risen and the Galadriel's relic, made a just-in-case-like expression as he opened the pouch again. Since I don't know what will happen. Hansu then very carefully started to scratch the divine stone fragment. Though it was extremely hard, the fact that it was a fragment meant that it was a piece which had been broken off already. When Hansu carefully stimulated the cracks in various parts of the divine stone fragment, a small piece dropped off. An extremely small piece, a fragment which wasn't even the size of 1 grain of rice. It was extremely small in comparison to the head-sized divine stone fragment, but Hansu carefully picked it off, covered it with the cocoon and put it back into the pouch. I don't want to use it, but I should prepare it for emergencies. Hansu created a few more and then thought of the next stage. The next guy should be. It should start to move soon. I can't calculate since I don't know how much time has passed. The reason why their territories were set was because they didn't have a good relationship with each other. There was one world tree they wanted to eat, but many had jumped onto it. Since the calamity fish has died, they will start to move seriously. I need to collect many more Gawi seeds before the root starts moving. This time, tens of thousands would not be enough. He basically needed to gather hundreds of thousands of them. I'll go to the Gawi colony. I hope no more than 3 days have passed. But from the fully recovered heart, it seems like quite a long time had passed. Hansu quickly ran outside. In the location a bit off from the route where it was originally a sea. Now it had become land from the corpse of the calamity fish and the debris it had thrown up, and many people were roaming around in his place while digging around the debris. Find it quickly. This is our side. Lighthouse is that side. Why are you coming all the way here after negotiating it? Wawahaha. I found it. This is amazing. Boom. The people who had divided up the areas and were now searching for the relics of the specters, who had now turned into dust, found them and then swung them in air with a content expression. Of course there were people who had gears better than the relics. But a relic which allowed for various different attacks and had an edge on every part of the weapon would be of great help. There was nothing much to say about the people who had worse weapons than the relics. And because of this the high-ranking clansmen of the 6 Great Pillars, the 12 Root, were madly searching around his giant trash island. Part of them searched the inside of the calamity fish and part of them searched outside the corpse endlessly. But Michael Christopher, the patriarch of Lighthouse, made a dissatisfied expression. How is there no reward for catching this humongous thing? Lu Hong, who was the newly appointed captain of the shock troopers, nodded at those words. I don't know why, but it didn't spit out any runes. And it seemed like there were two extremely important looking areas, but one had been crushed already and someone had already taken something out from the part that looked like the heart. TSK. There's no way to know what happened inside either. There weren't any messages or blue carrier pigeons. He had searched around just in case something was blocked off or hidden, but there was a limited amount of intel he could acquire from the already dead calamity fish. Lu Hong spoke towards Christopher. Anyways, everyone's nerves are getting on edge more and more. It has been quite a while since they had all gathered in one place like this, so, damn. There was quite a large amount of relics. But just because there was a large amount of relics did not mean that they would all get them equally. And due to this the clansmen were edgier and edgier. Any other reports? One of the 7 departed souls is heading this way. Didn't they die yet? I thought that they all died around the branch since they weren't seen for quite a while. Michael Christopher frowned. Even he, who did not fear anything, could only feel pressured by these guys. Christopher frowned as he spoke. Tell them to prevent as many collisions as possible. Since it's dangerous. Yes. He didn't know how the power struggle was going to play out from this incident. He needed to maintain as much of his forces as possible during this period when everyone was edgy. Losing Cowles Morin was a huge loss already. He could not lose any more than this. Anyways, where is that guy? Cowles Morin had reported to him before he went in. That there was a dumbass going in with the calamity fish as the target. But he knew now. That guy was not a dumbass. The giant corpse of the calamity fish in the distance proved this. Rumors about this guy will spread across all of the red zone. I hope I can find him. But Christopher didn't have many expectations. They hadn't finished their search in the calamity fish because it was so big, but it had already been 3 days since the calamity fish died. The fact that the guy had not appeared yet meant that he had died. Even if he was alive, why would he stay in a place like this? At that time, when he wasn't really expecting anything more, one of his underlings shouted out. They say they've found him. Ha! He's still here after 3 days. Christopher made a happy smile. Do. A deep part of the world tree root. Something that was huge and had the shape of a root, and was sucking onto the toxins rising up towards the trunk through the interior, stopped suddenly. It should be able to feel the vibrations made from the bastard who lives in the sea as it chews onto the world tree roots. Since there was no way to not know about the vibrations that occur when it starts eating. But even after a long period of time the vibrations were not happening, the root-shaped creature started to get curious. There was no need to suck on the toxins of the world tree if that thing didn't exist. Since it could just go directly to the sea and suck it out. Soon the root, or even snake-like, looking creature opened its huge mouth, let go of the world tree root it was biting into and then started to dig down into the ground. Towards the toxic sea, which was the territory of his rival. Proofreaders note: this is a sponsored chapter.